We are told a story, a beautiful and alluring story about what it means to awaken. It's a story painted in soft pastels of serene figures, meditating by tranquil lakes, their faces glowing with an unshakable peace. It's a story of finding bliss, of transcending problems, of floating gently above the turbulent waters of human existence. We see it on social media, in advertisements for yoga retreats, in the promises of a life finally free from pain. So we begin our own journey, seeking that light, that quiet, that release. But for so many of us, the path doesn't lead to a serene lake. It leads directly into the heart of a storm. Instead of bliss, we find anxiety. Instead of peace, we find chaos. Instead of connection, we feel a profound and terrifying isolation. The old joys turn to dust, relationships that once defined us crumble, the career we built feels like a cage, and the very ground beneath our feet seems to fall away, leaving us in a disorienting freefall. We ask ourselves, what have I done wrong? Is this a spiritual journey or a mental breakdown? Why does my attempt to find God, to find my higher self, feel like I am being dismantled piece by painful piece? This is the great unspoken secret of the spiritual path. This is the truth that the pastel-colored stories conveniently forget to mention. The awakening is not always a gentle sunrise. It is often a violent earthquake that shatters the bedrock of our identity. It is not an escape from pain. It is a direct, unavoidable confrontation with it. Today, we will walk directly into that storm. We will explore this process not as a failure, but as a sacred and necessary demolition. We will draw upon the deep wisdom of the Buddhist path, which has for thousands of years understood that the most profound liberation does not come from avoiding suffering, but from moving through it with awareness. This journey is about understanding that what feels like a breakdown is in fact the breakthrough in disguise. It is the painful, terrifying, and ultimately beautiful process of the old self falling away to make space for the truth of who you really are. The grand illusion we have been sold is perhaps one of the most subtle and damaging falsehoods of our modern age. It is the packaging and marketing of enlightenment itself. It presents awakening as a commodity, a peak experience you can acquire like a luxury car or a beachside property. This illusion is broadcast through the filtered perfection of 1,000 Instagram posts. A yoga practitioner in a flawless pose against a dramatic sunset. A perfectly lettered quote about letting go superimposed on a misty mountain. Peak. It is the promise of becoming a high vibration, being someone who no longer feels the messy, inconvenient, and painful emotions of ordinary life. It whispers that if you just buy the right crystals, attend the right workshop, repeat the right mantra, you will unlock a permanent state of bliss, a life scrubbed clean of all negativity. And so we chase this image. We try to perform our spirituality. We curate a persona of peace. We police our own thoughts, judging ourselves harshly for any flicker of anger, any wave of sadness, any tremor of fear. We believe that the goal is to feel good always. But this is a trap. It turns the most profound journey of inner transformation into just another frantic pursuit of the ego, another form of spiritual materialism. This relentless pressure to be positive, to be perpetually serene, is a recipe for a profound sense of failure, because the authentic spiritual path does not begin with a manufactured smile. It begins with the courage to finally stop pretending. If we dare to look past this modern marketplace of mindfulness and turn instead to the raw, unfiltered source texts of wisdom, we find a radically different story. The path of the Buddha, the one who is literally called the awakened one, was not a gentle ascent into bliss. It was a brutal, gut-wrenching 6-year odyssey of extreme self-denial and relentless struggle. He did not find the answer by affirming his way to happiness within his father's palace. He had to leave. He had to confront the raw truth of existence head-on, a truth his father had spent a lifetime trying to hide from him. This was his first breakdown, the shattering of his gilded cage. Imagine the young prince Siddhartha, for whom every possible comfort was arranged. His father, the king, decreed that the prince should never witness the slightest hint of suffering. But reality cannot be kept out forever. On a trip outside the palace walls, Siddhartha saw for the first time an old man, his body frail and bent, and the illusion of eternal youth was shattered. Then he saw a sick person ravaged by disease, and the illusion of invulnerable health was shattered. Finally, he saw a corpse being carried to cremation, and the ultimate illusion, the denial of death itself, was utterly destroyed. This was not a blissful experience, this was trauma. This was the complete collapse of his worldview, a confrontation with the stark, inescapable reality of dukkha, of the inherent unsatisfactoriness of conditioned existence. It was only after this devastating breakdown, after seeing the truth of old age, sickness and death, that he saw the fourth sight, a wandering ascetic, a seeker. The ascetic did not offer an easy escape, but he represented a path, a way to move through the suffering, not around it. The breakdown had to happen first. It was the catalyst for his entire quest. Years later, sitting beneath the Bodhi tree, on the verge of his final breakthrough, he did not experience a gentle wave of cosmic love. He experienced a war. This is the story of his confrontation with Mara, a figure often depicted as a demon, a tempter. But Mara is not some external devil. Mara is the embodiment of the Buddha's own mind. Mara is the personification of all of his deepest attachments, his most seductive desires, his most terrifying fears, his most subtle doubts. Mara paraded his beautiful daughters representing sensual craving. He unleashed armies of demons representing fear and hatred. He whispered the most insidious doubt of all. Who are you to think you can do this? You are not worthy. Go back to your comfortable life. The battle with Mara was the Buddha's final dark night of the soul. It was an all-out war with his own ego, his own conditioning, his own personal history. He didn't defeat Mara by fighting back with equal force. He defeated him with the power of simple, unwavering awareness. He just watched. He acknowledged the desire, the fear, the doubt without becoming entangled. He touched the earth, a simple gesture that said, I am here. I am present. I have a right to be here. And in that quiet act of witnessing, Mara dissolved. The breakthrough came only after he faced down the absolute worst that his own mind could throw at him. The bliss of nirvana was not a gift. It was the profound peace that remained after the inner war was over. This points to one of the most prevalent and dangerous pitfalls on the modern path, the phenomenon known as spiritual bypassing. This is the act of using spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid dealing with unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. It is the ego in its most clever disguise. It's using the mantra, everything is love and light, to suppress a very real and valid anger that needs to be heard. It's prematurely forgiving someone who has harmed you without ever allowing yourself to feel the righteous rage and grief of that violation. It's declaring it's all an illusion to numb the pain of a heartbreaking loss. It's a defense mechanism that masquerades as holiness. The problem is that what is repressed does not disappear. It simply goes into the basement of the psyche, where it gathers strength in the darkness. It festers. You can paint over the rust of your trauma with a thick coat of spiritual platitudes, but the metal beneath is still corroding. Eventually the structure will collapse, and often far more spectacularly than if you had simply dealt with the rust in the first place. The true spiritual breakdown is the opposite of bypassing. It is the courageous, terrifying decision to stop painting, to stop pretending, and to go down into the basement with a wire brush and a flashlight. It's the process of scraping away all the layers of denial, all the pretty stories, and facing the raw, corroded truth of your own pain. It is messy, abrasive, and deeply uncomfortable, but it is the only path to true healing and integration. So when we speak of this breakdown, it is crucial to redefine it. In a culture that pathologizes every deviation from a narrow band of acceptable feelings and behaviors, it is easy to label such an experience as a mental illness, as something being wrong with you. And while spiritual crises can sometimes coexist with or trigger genuine clinical conditions that require professional support, the process we are describing is at its core something different. It is not a malfunction of the system. It is an intelligent, purposeful dismantling of a false system. It is the demolition of the egoic structure. What is the ego? It is not your true self. It is a construct, a bundle of conditioned beliefs, memories, social roles and stories you have been telling yourself about who you are. I am a successful person. I am an unlucky person. I am a good son. I am a victim. These are just stories. The breakdown happens when the life force within you, the impulse towards truth and wholeness, begins to shake these stories apart. It recognizes that the identity you have built is a prison, a skin that has become too small, and it begins to tear it down from the inside. This process feels like death because from the ego's perspective, it is a death. It is the death of the illusion of control, the death of cherished narratives, the death of the person you thought you were. It is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that you are finally becoming whole. It is a sign of profound spiritual health. We have been conditioned to fear the demolition, to cling to the walls of our prison as they tremble, but the wisdom of the path tells us to relax, to let the walls crumble. Because only then do we realize we were never imprisoned in the first place. The sky was above us all along, and so we must first have the courage to tear down the glittering facade of the commercialized spiritual myth. We must see it for the illusion it is. Only then can we turn our attention inward to the truth of our own experience. Now let us look closer at the first hairline fractures that appear in the walls of our own carefully constructed reality. The first subtle tremors that signal this sacred demolition has truly begun. Before the great earthquake that levels the city, there are tremors. They are subtle at first, easily dismissed. A faint rattling of the windows, a momentary shudder in the floorboards. You might think it was just a heavy truck passing by or a trick of the imagination, but then it happens again, a little stronger this time, a little less deniable. This is how the breakdown begins. It is not a sudden cataclysmic event, but a series of quiet, deeply unsettling tremors that start to shake the very foundations of the life you have so carefully constructed. The first and most common tremor is a profound and creeping sense of disillusionment. The world begins to lose its flavor. The goals that once drove you with a burning ambition are reached, and you stand at the summit only to find the view is empty and the air is thin. The promotion you worked tirelessly for, the bigger house you went into debt to buy, the social recognition you craved. They all arrive, but the promised feeling of lasting happiness does not. This is the great lie of the ego and the culture it created, the arrival fallacy. The persistent belief that when you acquire the thing, whatever your particular thing may be, you will finally feel whole. You will finally be at peace. The breakdown begins in that quiet, hollow moment, after the celebration is over, when you are alone with your new prize and you feel, or worse, you feel a quiet despair, the terrifying recognition that you've been chasing a phantom. The taste of your favorite food becomes bland. The excitement of a new purchase fades. Before you've even taken the tags off the conversations that once animated, you now feel like meaningless noise. It's the feeling of having a mouthful of ash when you were promised a feast. This is the soul's intelligence beginning to stir gently at first, whispering that you have been looking for nourishment in all the wrong places. This disillusionment gives rise to the second tremor, an unnerving feeling of inauthenticity. You start to feel like an actor playing a role in the movie of your own life. You know your lines perfectly. You perform the role of the competent professional, the loving spouse, the responsible parent, the loyal friend. You wear the right costumes, say the right things, and everyone around you applauds the performance. But behind the mask, a growing chasm opens up. You watch yourself going through the motions from a distance, a silent, disconnected observer. There is the you that smiles at your boss's joke, and then there is the real you somewhere deep inside, watching this puppet smile and feeling a profound sense of exhaustion and alienation. This is more than just a bad mood or feeling off. It is a soul-level fatigue that comes from the immense continuous effort of upholding a false self. You feel like an imposter, a fraud waiting for the moment when someone will finally see through the facade and call you out. Let us imagine a man, a composite of so many modern lives. Let's call him James. James is the epitome of success. He has a corner office with a panoramic city view, a sleek German car in the garage of his beautiful suburban home, a lovely family, and the respect of his community. He has played the game and he has won. But the tremors have started. He feels them on Sunday evenings, a wave of quiet dread that has nothing to do with the week ahead and everything to do with the emptiness within. He feels them in the morning, looking into the bathroom mirror while buttoning his expensive shirt, catching the eye of the man staring back and feeling a flicker of non-recognition as if looking at a stranger. One Tuesday afternoon, in the middle of a quarterly earnings meeting, this tremor becomes a quake. As his colleagues debate profit margins and market penetration, a question detonates in the silent theater of his mind, a question that comes from nowhere and everywhere at once. Is this all there is? The question is so powerful, so terrifyingly vast, that the voices in the room fade into a meaningless hum. The charts and graphs on the screen blur into abstract patterns. For a moment, the entire reality of the room, the company, his career, his life seems utterly absurd, a frantic and elaborate game about nothing. This is the third and perhaps most potent tremor, the emergence of the great existential questions. They bubble up from a place deeper than intellect, a place the ego cannot access or control. Who am I really beneath the titles, the roles, the possessions? What is the genuine purpose of this brief fleeting dance of life? What am I meant to be doing with these precious few years? These questions are terrifying because they threaten the ego's very existence. The ego is the manager of the known, the curator of the story. Its job is to maintain the script, to keep the performance going. These questions tear the script to pieces. They point towards a vast, terrifying and liberating unknown, and the ego, whose primary function is to ensure survival through control, has no answer for them. It can only respond with fear, with distraction, with a desperate attempt to change the subject back to something it can manage, like the next deadline or the next vacation. But once these questions have truly taken root in your consciousness, they do not leave. They are the sound of your own soul knocking on the door of the prison you have built for it. As the walls of this prison begin to crack, something else happens. Your skin gets thinner. This is the fourth tremor, a heightened, almost painful sensitivity to the world. The normal psychological defenses and numbing mechanisms you have used your whole life to navigate a difficult world start to dissolve. You find yourself feeling everything more deeply, more intensely. A story on the evening news about a famine on the other side of the world, something you might have once registered with a fleeting moment of pity, now pierces your heart and leaves you weeping. You see the tired, strained face of the cashier at the grocery store, and you feel a wave of their exhaustion and quiet desperation. You become acutely, painfully aware of the suffering inherent in the world, the casual cruelty, the thoughtless destruction. But this new sensitivity is not just directed outwards, it is also directed inwards. The walls that kept your own buried pain locked away begin to crumble. The grief from a loss 10 years ago that you thought you were over suddenly resurfaces with the force of a tidal wave. The deep-seated anxiety you've masked with workaholism or constant entertainment begins to thrum just beneath the surface, a relentless, low-frequency hum. The anger you were taught as a child was unacceptable begins to stir in your belly. You feel raw, exposed, vulnerable, as if you are walking through life without a protective outer layer. Every small slight, every criticism, every disappointment feels like a direct blow. This can be profoundly disorienting. After feeling like a numb and disconnected actor, you are suddenly plunged into a state of hyperfeeling, and the sheer intensity of it all can make you want to retreat from the world entirely, to hide under the covers until the storm passes. These tremors, the disillusionment with a world that no longer satisfies the exhausting inauthenticity of playing a role, the eruption of life's deepest questions, and a raw, overwhelming sensitivity are the first signs that the old structure of the self is becoming unstable. For our friend James, the world no longer makes sense. The goals are meaningless. The performance is exhausting. The questions are haunting him. And the armor he wore to protect himself from pain has rusted through, leaving his heart exposed to the elements. This state is not a sign of madness or weakness. It is the beginning of the end of a lie. It is the first courageous, albeit terrifying step out of the shallow waters of a conditioned life and into the deep, turbulent ocean of truth. This profound questioning, this feeling of being a stranger in your own skin, inevitably leads to a direct and often painful confrontation. It is a confrontation with the very architect of that skin, the master of the illusion, the structure that holds your entire identity together, and is now fighting for its very survival. The ego itself. If the first tremors of awakening are the cracks appearing in the dam, what comes next is the full, desperate force of the dam's architect trying to hold it together with his bare hands. This is the agony of the ego. It is the terrified primal scream of the identity you thought you were, as it feels the ground of its own existence dissolving beneath it. To understand this battle, we must first be very clear about who or what is fighting. From the Buddhist perspective, the ego is not a solid, singular thing. It is not the real you. It is a process, a verb masquerading as a noun. It is a frantic, lifelong contraction around a collection of stories, beliefs, memories, and sensations. It is the inner narrator that constantly whispers, I, me, mine. It says, I am a good person. My opinion is correct. That person wronged me. It is the part of us that builds a resume, checks its reflection in the mirror, and compares its life to the lives of others. Its primary function, developed since childhood, is to create a sense of a separate, continuous, and solid self in order to navigate the world. And in the conventional world, it is a useful, even necessary tool. But on the spiritual path, this tool becomes the tyrant. The breakdown process is a direct threat to its sovereignty, and it will not surrender its throne without a ferocious fight. It perceives this sacred dissolution not as liberation, but as annihilation. The ego's first and most powerful weapon is fear. As the old certainties begin to wobble, the ego floods your system with a tidal wave of anxiety, projecting 1,000 catastrophic future scenarios. It takes the gentle, expansive whisper of the soul, perhaps this career is no longer fulfilling, and twists it into the terrifying shout. If you quit your job, you will end up destitute and homeless, a disgrace to your family. It takes the quiet realization that a relationship is no longer serving your growth and transforms it into the panicked shriek. If you leave, you will die utterly alone and unloved. It seizes the feeling of spiritual emptiness and labels it. This is not awakening. This is severe depression. You are losing your mind. You are broken beyond repair. It is a master of catastrophic thinking. It hijacks the brain's ancient survival mechanisms, which are designed to protect you from physical threats like saber-toothed tigers, and turns them against your own spiritual evolution. This manufactured terror serves a single purpose: to scare you so profoundly that you retreat from the unfamiliar vastness of the unknown and scramble back into the familiar, cramped but predictable confines of the old identity. It wants you to stop questioning, to stop feeling, and to get back to the business of maintaining the status quo. When fear isn't enough, the ego deploys its second great tactic, the creation of external drama and blame. The ego cannot bear to look at its own insubstantiality, so it projects the source of its discomfort onto the outside world. It creates a compelling narrative with heroes and villains, and it always casts itself as the righteous victim. The profound inner ache of your own soul's dissatisfaction becomes your partner's fault for not being loving enough. The stress of your own internal conflict becomes your boss's fault for being too demanding. The discomfort of your own changing values becomes society's fault for being corrupt and materialistic. This is an incredibly seductive strategy because it absolves you of the terrifying responsibility of looking within. It is far easier to rage against a perceived enemy than it is to sit quietly with the aching void in your own heart. The ego will engineer arguments, fixate on injustices, and obsess over the flaws of others, all as an elaborate smokescreen to distract from the real work at hand, the dismantling of its own structure. In this phase, you might find yourself becoming incredibly irritable, judgmental, and argumentative. You are fighting for your life, or at least the ego thinks you are, and it will pick a fight with anyone and anything to avoid confronting the real battle which is happening entirely within you. Simultaneously, the ego will cling with the desperation of a drowning man to the wreckage of its old identity. It doubles down on the very roles and personas that are cracking apart. If your identity was built on being a successful professional, you might find yourself suddenly working 18-hour days, obsessing over a promotion, desperately trying to prove to yourself and the world that the old reality is still solid. If you were the caretaker in your family, you might become frantically enmeshed in everyone else's problems, trying to fix their lives as a way to avoid the terrifying chaos of your own. You might go on a spending spree, buying new clothes, a new car, anything that reinforces the story of who you are. This is the ego's frantic attempt to paper over the cracks. See, it screams, everything is fine, I'm still me, I'm still successful, still needed, still this person. It's a performance, and the audience is primarily yourself. You are trying to convince the part of you that is waking up, to go back to sleep, to believe in the dream, that it has started to see through. This desperate clinging is fueled by the ego's core needs, the need to be right, and the need to feel superior through comparison. To feel solid, the ego must feel correct. During this unraveling, you may find that you have an overwhelming compulsion to win every argument, to have the last word, to prove your point no matter how trivial. Each small win provides a temporary hit of validation, a fleeting sense of solidity in a world that feels like quicksand. At the same time, the ego's comparison machine goes into overdrive. It either looks at others who seem happy and normal and uses them as a stick to beat you with, "Why can't you just be like them? What is so wrong with you?" Or it flips the script and creates a new, more subtle identity, that of the spiritual person. This is the birth of the spiritual ego, which looks down on the unawakened masses, the sheeple, and prides itself on its profound struggles. They wouldn't understand my dark night, it says, with a secret sense of superiority. Both are traps. Both are the ego simply changing costumes, finding a new way to define itself as separate and special, thereby reinforcing the very illusion of a separate self that the awakening process is trying to dissolve. And here we arrive at the very heart of this agonizing war. The entire project of the ego is to build and defend a solid, permanent, independent self. But the most profound truth that the breakdown is forcing you to realize is what the Buddha called anatta, or no self. This is not a nihilistic statement that you do not exist. It means that there is no fixed, unchanging, independent you to be found. The self you have identified with your entire life is, upon close examination, revealed to be a fleeting collection of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and stories, all arising and passing away moment by moment, completely dependent on causes and conditions. You are not the storm, you are the sky in which the storm of thought and feeling takes place. This truth is the ultimate existential threat to the ego. It is the equivalent of telling a character in a novel that they are merely words on a page. The agony of this phase is the immense friction between the ego's frantic lifelong habit of contracting into a solid me and the dawning experiential truth of anatta, which reveals that there is nothing solid to grasp onto. The ego's death is not a real death because the ego was never truly alive. It is the death of a deeply held illusion. Imagine a powerful king who has spent his entire life ruling from a magnificent castle on a beach. He believes his castle, with its high walls and strong towers, is a permanent fortress. This king is your ego. The castle is your identity. One day the tide begins to rise. This is the tide of awareness, of awakening. The water begins to lap at the foundations of the castle, which is made entirely of sand. The king does not see the tide as a natural cyclical process. He sees it as a declaration of war. He panics. He screams at his soldiers, your thoughts, to fight back. They frantically dig moats, build the sand walls higher, and throw stones at the waves. The king is filled with rage, terror, and despair. He is exhausted by the constant, futile battle. The source of his agony is not the ocean. The ocean is just being the ocean. The source of his agony is his violent, delusional resistance to the nature of reality, his refusal to accept that a sandcastle cannot and was never meant to last forever against the sea. The breakdown is the moment the king finally sees the futility of his fight, the moment the walls begin to dissolve back into the sand from which they were made. This internal war, this frantic resistance to the inevitable, is precisely what plunges us into the next and perhaps most infamous stage of this journey. It is the phase where the light seems to vanish completely, where we are left shivering in the ruins of our sandcastle, a stage known as the dark night of the soul. The battle with the ego, with its desperate clinging and frantic resistance, eventually exhausts itself. The inner warrior lays down its arms not in victory but in utter defeat, and this is where the true darkness descends. This is the stage that has been whispered about by mystics and saints for centuries, a name that carries the weight of immense spiritual trial, the dark night of the soul. The very phrase conjures images of profound suffering, of a spiritual winter where all light and warmth have vanished from the world. If the ego's agony was a raging fire, the dark night is the cold, black, desolate landscape of ash that remains after the fire has burned out. It is the king from our earlier story, no longer fighting the tide, but sitting alone amidst the silent, wet ruins of his sandcastle under a sky wiped clean of moon and stars. It is a state of utter desolation. It is vital here, at the threshold of this sacred darkness, to speak with care and clarity. The experience of the dark night of the soul can look from the outside almost identical to clinical depression. There is often a profound anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure. There is lethargy, a heavy-limbed exhaustion that makes the smallest tasks feel monumental. There can be deep feelings of hopelessness, social withdrawal, and a sense that life has lost all of its meaning. Let it be said without ambiguity, if you are experiencing these things, seeking the support of a therapist or mental health professional is an act of wisdom and courage. There is no shame in it, and the spiritual journey does not exclude the psychological. The two can, and often do, coexist. However, there is a subtle but crucial distinction to be made. While the symptoms may overlap, their underlying nature is different. Clinical depression is often experienced as a state of being stuck, a downward spiral of psychic and physiological patterns that feels like a malfunction. The dark night, in contrast, has a purpose. It is not a malfunction, but a function. It is a process of purgation, of stripping away. While depression often carries the belief I am worthless, the dark night whispers a more fundamental and terrifying message. Everything I and the world once valued is worthless. It is not so much a psychological crisis as it is a crisis of meaning, a spiritual void. It feels like a death because it is a death. It is the death of the seeker, the death of the one who was trying to get somewhere, leaving only the raw, empty space of being. To be in the dark night is to know a specific flavor of emptiness. It is not the peaceful, spacious emptiness spoken of in Zen. It is a barren, hollow, and terrifying void. The universe, which may have once felt alive with magic and synchronicity, now seems like a cold, meaningless mechanical machine. Any connection you once felt to God, to spirit, to a higher power feels severed. Your prayers, your meditations, your pleas feel like they are being launched into a vacuum, hitting a ceiling of lead and falling back down as dead weight. This is perhaps the most painful aspect, the feeling of being utterly, cosmically alone and abandoned by the very source you were seeking. Life loses its color and texture. A beautiful sunset is just a meteorological phenomenon. Your favorite song is just a sequence of organized sounds. The love you feel for your family can feel like a distant theoretical concept rather than a felt reality. There is no comfort to be found anywhere. Everything the ego used to cling to for identity and pleasure, career, relationships, hobbies, beliefs, even the spiritual path itself has been revealed as a sandcastle, and the tide has washed it all away. You are left with nothing. Not peace, not bliss, just nothing. To understand the profound purpose of this agonizing state, we turn to the story of the great Tibetan yogi Milarepa. Before he became an enlightened master, Milarepa was a sorcerer who, in an act of revenge, used black magic to murder dozens of people. Consumed by guilt, he sought out a teacher, the great Guru Marpa, begging for the teachings that would lead to liberation. But Marpa did not welcome him with open arms and soothing words. Instead, he subjected Milarepa to a series of brutal, seemingly pointless trials. He ordered Milarepa to single-handedly build a tall stone tower. When it was nearly complete, Marpa would find some fault and command him to tear it down stone by stone and return every stone to its original place. This happened 3 times. Milarepa's body was broken, his back covered in festering sores, his mind plunged into the absolute depths of despair. He felt tortured and abandoned by the master he had placed all his hope in. He was in his dark night, a purgatory of meaningless, back-breaking labor and hopelessness, driven to the brink of suicide. But Marpa was not being cruel. He was a master spiritual surgeon. He knew that before Milarepa's mind could receive the pure teachings of the Dharma, it had to be purified of the immense negative karma he had created. Each act of building and demolishing the towers was not about the towers themselves. It was an excruciating alchemical process, burning away his pride, his guilt, his expectations and his arrogance through sheer physical and mental suffering. It was only after Milarepa was completely broken, all his hopes for an easy path utterly shattered, that Marpa finally embraced him as a student. and bestowed upon him the profound teachings he so craved. Milarepa's story reveals the secret of the dark night. The void is not a punishment. It is a purification. It is a divine detoxification of the soul. Your entire system, body, mind and spirit is being purged of everything that is false. All the second-hand beliefs you inherited from your family and culture, all the conditioned emotional responses, all the subtle addictions to praise, to comfort, to being in control, all the spiritual concepts you've collected that have become just another form of egoic baggage. All of it is being systematically dismantled and dissolved. Nature provides us with a perfect metaphor for this: the controlled burn of a field or forest. To an uninformed observer, it looks like an absolute catastrophe. Black smoke, raging flames, the destruction of all visible life. But the fire is intelligent. It is burning away all the dead undergrowth, all the weeds and invasive species. And in the process, it is returning vital nutrients to the soil. The fire creates the conditions for a new, healthier, more authentic ecosystem to be born. The dark night is your personal controlled burn. It is devastating, but it is creating a rich, fertile and empty ground within you, preparing the soil for the seed of your true nature to finally truly grow. So what can one do when they find themselves in this starless land? The ego's response is predictable. It will try to fix it. It will frantically search for a new belief system, a new teacher, a new technique to fill the void and make the bad feelings go away. It will try to think its way out of it, analyzing and philosophizing about its state. But this is like trying to build another sandcastle while the tide is still high. The only way through the dark night is surrender. This is not a passive resignation, but an active, courageous, and radical act of trust. It is the willingness to lie down in the scorched, barren field of your own being and just be there. It is the courage to feel the absolute fullness of your hopelessness without telling a story about it. It is the strength to allow the feeling of cosmic abandonment to wash through you without reaching for a distraction. It is whispering yes to the emptiness. It means letting go of the need for an answer, for a sign, for any glimmer of light on the horizon. It is the ultimate act of faith, trusting that this darkness is a part of the path, that it has a sacred purpose, even when every cell in your body screams that you have been forsaken forever. It is in this profound darkness, in this state of radical surrender, where all seeking has ceased, that we finally become quiet enough to meet the forgotten residents of our own psyche. The things we have repressed, denied, and disowned, our entire lives begin to stir in the gloom. To continue our journey toward the dawn, we must now turn and face them. We must learn to meet our own shadow. In the silent, surrendered darkness of the void, when the frantic noise of the ego has finally subsided, you begin to hear other things. In the stillness, you become aware of stirrings from the deep, the rustling of nocturnal creatures that have lived in the basement of your psyche your entire life, but whose sounds were always drowned out by the bright, loud city of your conscious personality. These are the inhabitants of your shadow, and in the dark night, they are finally summoned into the light. The concept of the shadow, most famously articulated by the psychologist Carl Jung, is one of the most vital keys to understanding this stage of the journey. Imagine that from the moment you were born, you were given a psychological bag. Into this bag, you learn to stuff all the parts of yourself that were deemed unacceptable, unworthy, or inconvenient. Every time a parent said, "Nice children don't get angry," you stuffed your rage into the bag. Every time a teacher said, "Don't be so selfish," you stuffed your healthy ambition into the bag. When you were told big boys don't cry or good girls aren't loud, your vulnerability and your boisterous joy went into the bag. Your wildness, your messiness, your greed, your envy, your intense sexuality, your unorthodox creativity, any impulse or trait that didn't fit the narrow mold of the good, acceptable person you were supposed to be was disowned, exiled into the darkness of this bag. This shadow is not inherently evil. It is simply that which has been rejected. In the language of Buddhism, these energies are related to the kleshas, the mental defilements or poisons that cloud our true nature. But they are also just that, energies. And energy cannot be destroyed, only repressed where it festers and gains power in the dark. For most of our lives, the ego acts as the vigilant guardian of this bag, sitting on it, keeping the lid firmly shut. It spends an enormous amount of energy on this repression because these shadow elements threaten the curated, clean, respectable image of the self it has so carefully constructed. But the breakdown process, and especially the dark night, is the moment the guardian finally collapses from exhaustion. The ego is too weak, too defeated, too disillusioned to keep the lid on anymore. And so the contents of the bag begin to spill out. This is a profoundly shocking and terrifying experience. A person who has built their entire identity around being a calm, patient, and loving individual may suddenly be flooded with fantasies of extreme violence or consumed by a volcanic, irrational rage that seems to come from nowhere. A person who prides themselves on their generosity and compassion may be horrified to discover a wellspring of intense jealousy, envy, and greed within them. Someone who has lived a chaste, pious life might be besieged by what they consider to be blasphemous thoughts or overwhelmed by powerful sexual urges that feel monstrous and alien. It feels like you are going insane. It feels as if a demon has taken possession of you. You look at yourself in the mirror and think, "This is not me. I am a good person." Where is all this darkness coming from? The terror comes from the shattering of your self-concept. But you are not becoming a monster. You are simply for the first time meeting the parts of yourself that have been locked in the basement your entire life, and they are starved for attention. There is a beautiful story that illustrates the only way to navigate this encounter. A young monk renowned for his gentle nature was deeply tormented. Every time he sat for meditation, his mind was hijacked by an obsessive burning rage toward a senior monk who had publicly embarrassed him. He tried every technique he knew. He focused on his breath, but the anger was a roaring fire that consumed it. He recited mantras of purification, but the anger mocked them. He tried to replace the angry thoughts with thoughts of loving kindness, but it felt like putting a cheap bandage on a gaping wound. Feeling like a complete failure, he confessed his struggle to his Zen master. "Master," he wept, "I am a terrible monk. My heart is full of hatred. I am a fraud." The old master listened patiently, his eyes filled with compassion. He did not scold the young monk or offer him a new technique. He simply said, "Next time you sit and anger comes to visit, do not treat it as an enemy to be vanquished. Treat it as a guest who has traveled a long way to see you. Stop what you are doing. In your mind, prepare a comfortable cushion for it. Invite it to sit with you. Pour it a cup of tea, and then gently ask it why it has come. Ask what it needs. Don't argue with it. Just listen." The young monk was bewildered by this advice, but his desperation outweighed his skepticism. The next day in meditation, as expected, the familiar fire of rage began to rise. But this time, instead of fighting it, he followed his master's instructions. He visualized himself turning toward the anger, welcoming it. He offered it a seat, a cup of tea. He sat with the raw, burning energy, and with a sense of gentle curiosity, he asked, "Why are you here? What do you have to tell me?" And in the silence, an answer arose. He listened, and he realized the anger was not just about the recent humiliation. It was the ancient rage of a little boy who was never allowed to speak up for himself, who was taught that his feelings didn't matter. It was a powerful life force, the energy of self-protection that had been suppressed for decades. It wasn't a monster, it was a wounded child, and all it wanted was to finally be seen and heard. By meeting it with compassion, instead of condemnation, its toxic, destructive charge began to soften, and its fiery energy began to transform into profound self-understanding and strength. This story contains the entire practice. The way to heal the split between yourself and your shadow is to change your fundamental relationship to it. It requires a radical shift from identification and resistance to mindful, compassionate observation. The untrained mind immediately identifies with the energy, "I am angry." This statement equates your entire being with the fleeting emotion. Mindfulness creates a space. It allows for a different thought. There is anger here. I am aware of the feeling of anger arising in my body and mind. In that space, you are no longer the anger. You are the loving awareness that is holding the anger. You become a safe container for these difficult energies rather than a victim of them. You don't have to act on the jealousy. You don't have to believe the story the greed is telling you. You simply have to be willing to feel the raw energy of it in your body without judgment. Let the fire of rage burn in your chest, but don't throw it at anyone. Let the cold grip of fear seize your stomach, but don't run from it. Let the bitter taste of envy be on your tongue, but don't speak it. This is not suppression. Suppression is pushing it away. This is a radical form of acceptance. You are allowing these exiled parts of yourself to finally come home, to be felt, to be acknowledged, and to be held in the spacious, healing embrace of your own awareness. The final secret is this: you are not just inviting monsters back into your house to be nice to them. You are liberating your own trapped power. The shadow, which appears at first as a repository of all that is terrible, is actually where your greatest treasures are hidden. As Jung himself said, the shadow contains pure gold. That repressed rage you were so afraid of, when integrated, its energy becomes the fuel for setting healthy boundaries, for speaking your truth, and for fighting for justice in the world. That shame-inducing greed, when met with awareness, it may reveal a powerful, healthy ambition and a life force that you need to accomplish your purpose. That vulnerability you learn to hide, it is the only key you have to genuine intimacy, deep connection, and an open heart. The wild, untamable part of you that you were taught to civilize. It holds your spontaneity, your authentic creativity, your joy, and your connection to the earth. To heal is not to become a perfect, sanitized version of yourself, free of all darkness. To heal is to become whole, to have the courage to own every single part of yourself, the light and the dark. This is the sacred alchemy of shadow work. You are taking the lead of your repressed self and transforming it into the gold of your authentic being. This integration, this reclamation, is what begins to fill the terrifying void of the dark night, not with the old illusions of the ego, but with the solid, grounded, and unshakable reality of your own wholeness. This profound inner work of facing one's own demons and reclaiming one's lost parts is by its very nature an intensely solitary journey. No one can go into your basement for you. No one can drink tea with your rage for you. This deep internal realignment can create a chasm between you and those who are still living comfortably within the old structures, playing by the old rules. This often leads to the next painful yet utterly necessary stage of the process, the great shedding of the relationships and social connections that no longer resonate with the whole person you are courageously becoming. The profound inner alchemy of meeting your shadow, of integrating the disowned parts of your psyche, is a process that happens in the silent sanctuary of your own being. It is a solitary and sacred work, but its effects do not remain contained within you. As your inner world is fundamentally restructured, the earthquake inevitably sends shockwaves into your outer world, cracking the foundations of the social structures you once inhabited. The person who is emerging from the darkness is not the same person who entered it, and this new person may no longer fit into the old life. This begins the next, often heartbreaking stage of the journey, the great shedding. It is the painful yet necessary sloughing off of relationships, friendships, and group identities that are no longer in resonance with your evolving truth. It is the snake shedding a skin that has become too tight a process that is essential for its continued growth, but which leaves it feeling raw and vulnerable for a time. The primary driver of this shedding is a fundamental shift in resonance. Think of it in terms of energetic frequency. The conversations, activities, and values that once connected you to your friends and family may now feel dissonant, like a radio tuned to the wrong station, emitting only static. The weekend gatherings centered around gossip about mutual acquaintances, the endless complaints about work, or spouses, the obsession with material acquisitions and celebrity culture. These things that may have once provided a sense of connection and belonging now feel profoundly draining. You sit among people you have known for years, people you have loved, and yet you feel a sense of deep alienation, as if you are a traveler from a foreign land who no longer speaks the local language. You have nothing to contribute to a conversation about a television show when your mind is consumed with the nature of consciousness. You cannot feign enthusiasm for a new shopping mall when your heart is breaking open with compassion for the suffering of the world. This is not a judgment. It is not that you have become better or more spiritual than them. It is simply that your path has diverged. Your soul is now nourished by different things, by silence, by authenticity, by deep inquiry, and the old diet of superficiality has become tasteless, even toxic to your system. This divergence is rarely a clean or sudden break. More often, it is a slow, painful, and awkward drift, accompanied by immense feelings of guilt and grief. You are the one changing, so it is easy to internalize the narrative that you are the one at fault. You feel like a bad friend for no longer wanting to participate in the old rituals. You feel guilty for being distant, for not having the energy to pretend anymore. There is a deep grief for the loss of shared history, for the easy comfort of familiarity for the person you once were in their eyes. You are mourning not just the potential loss of the relationship, but the death of an old version of yourself. It is crucial during this time to hold yourself with immense compassion, to understand that this shedding is not an act of betrayal, but a profound act of loyalty to the truth that is emerging within you. It is a natural law of growth. Not every bud on a tree becomes a flower, and not every relationship is meant to last a lifetime. Some are scaffolding there to support a particular phase of construction. When that phase is over, the scaffolding must come down for the building to be truly seen. Let us imagine a woman we will call Clara. For 15 years, Clara's social life has revolved around a tight-knit group of friends from university. Their bond was forged in late-night study sessions and cemented over years of brunches, shopping trips, and dissecting every detail of their romantic lives. But Clara has been through the tremors, the dark night, and the deep dive into her own shadow. She is changing. She goes to brunch, but the conversation feels like a foreign film with no subtitles. While her friends discuss their partner's annoying habits or the latest home renovation trend, Clara is grappling with the insights from her meditation, the terror and beauty of seeing her own ego dissolve. When she tentatively tries to share a sliver of her inner world, perhaps mentioning a powerful insight about impermanence, she is met with a wall of polite blank stares, an awkward silence, and then a quick change of subject. Or worse, she receives well-meaning but utterly unhelpful advice. "Oh, Clara, you're thinking too much. You just need a vacation to clear your head." The invitations gradually become less frequent. The text messages are answered more slowly. The drift is undeniable, and it hurts. It feels like a rejection of her very core, because for the first time she is trying to show them her core, and they are turning away not out of malice but out of sheer incomprehension. From the other side, your transformation can be perceived as a crisis. To your friends and family who are still operating within the consensus reality that you are leaving behind, your inner breakdown looks exactly like a public one. They see you withdrawing, quitting hobbies you once loved, speaking of strange concepts, and questioning everything they hold to be solid and true. Out of genuine love and concern, they may try to fix you to pull you back to the person they once knew. They may say you are depressed, that you are having a midlife crisis, that you've become weird or too serious. What they cannot see is that you are not falling apart, you are falling together. At a deeper subconscious level, your journey can also be a threat. Your radical questioning of life's meaning implicitly questions the meaning of their lives, and that is a terrifying prospect for a mind that is invested in the stability of its world. In order to protect their own reality, they may need to label you to put you in a box marked crazy or selfish or going through a phase. This judgment is a defense mechanism. It creates a safe distance from the destabilizing energy of your transformation. Facing this misunderstanding from people you love is one of the loneliest and most painful trials of the path. Yet it is in the empty space created by this great shedding that a new possibility can arise. In the vacuum of her old social life, our friend Clara is forced into a profound solitude. At first, it feels like a painful lack, a confirmation of her loneliness and isolation. But as she learns to sit with the discomfort, something shifts. She starts taking long, silent walks in nature and discovers a companionship in the steadfast presence of an old oak tree that feels more real and nourishing than any brunch conversation. She dusts off an old journal and begins to write, not to perform for anyone, but to speak her own raw truth to the page. In doing so, she discovers a wise, compassionate voice within herself, an inner best friend she never knew existed. She learns the crucial difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the pain of being alone. Solitude is the richness, the peace, the joy of being alone. This period of solitude is a sacred and non-negotiable part of the journey. It is a recalibration. It is the time when you learn to source your validation, your sense of worth, and your happiness from within, rather than constantly seeking it in the reflection of others' eyes. You are learning to stand on your own 2 feet, spiritually and emotionally, for the very first time. And then when you have become comfortable in your own solitude, when you no longer need others to feel whole, a new magic begins to happen. Clara, following her newfound love for quiet contemplation, decides to join a weekly meditation group she finds at a local community center. She walks in nervous and unsure, but as she sits in the silence with these strangers, she feels a sense of belonging that is deeper than anything she has ever known. After the meditation, a woman shares a struggle with her ego that almost perfectly mirrors Clara's own experience. Another man speaks about the pain of being misunderstood by his family. For the first time, Clara is not met with blank stares, but with knowing nods of recognition. She has found her people. She has found her Sangha, the spiritual community. These new relationships are not built on shared history or social convenience. They are built on a shared resonance, a common dedication to the inner journey. This process of shedding the external world, of losing the roles and relationships that once defined you, acts as a powerful catalyst. It removes all the buffers. It leaves you alone, face to face, with the fundamental nature of your own experience, with the raw data of your own joy and your own pain. It is here, in this stripped-down reality, that the core teachings of the Buddha cease to be a distant philosophy and become a visceral lived experience. It is here that you truly encounter the 4 noble truths. In the stark and silent landscape that follows the great shedding, when the comforting distractions of the outer world have fallen away, you are left with nothing but the raw data of your own existence. There are no more roles to hide behind, no more social gatherings to numb the ache, no more external validation to prop you up. It is just you and the fundamental truth of your own experience. It is here, in this stripped-down, vulnerable and radically honest space, that the core teachings of the Buddha cease to be an ancient philosophy and become your lived, breathing reality. You are now standing in the laboratory of your own heart, perfectly positioned to verify for yourself the diagnosis of the human condition he offered 2,500 years ago, the 4 noble truths. These are not beliefs to be adopted, but realities to be seen. And the breakdown you have endured has been the harsh but perfect lens through which to see them. The first noble truth is the truth of dukkha. This Pali word is often translated as suffering, but its meaning is far deeper and more subtle. It is not just the obvious pain of sickness, old age, and death. It is the pervasive background hum of unsatisfactoriness that permeates all of conditioned existence. It is the inherent friction of being alive, the feeling that things are never quite right, the stress of trying to hold on to that which is by its very nature constantly changing. Before the breakdown, you may have intellectually understood this idea. Now you know it in your bones. The entire process you have been through is dukkha. The disillusionment with success was dukkha. The agony of the ego fighting for its life was dukkha. The cold, barren emptiness of the dark night was dukkha. The heartbreak of losing friends was dukkha. You are no longer reading a definition of dukkha. You are marinating in its reality. It is the air you breathe, the ground you walk on. And seeing this, truly seeing it, is not a cause for despair. It is a moment of profound validation. The Buddha saw this. He named it. This deep, pervasive ache is not a personal failure. It is a fundamental characteristic of the unenlightened human experience. You are not alone. Your pain is not a mistake. It is the starting point of the path. Having seen the symptom, the breakdown then forces you to see its cause. This is the second noble truth. The truth of samudaya, which states that the origin of dukkha is tanha, a word that translates as thirst, craving, or desire, and its companion, upadana, which means clinging or grasping. Quiet laboratory of your stripped-down awareness, you can now watch this mechanism in real time with excruciating clarity. A pleasant memory arises, and you can feel the immediate visceral impulse of your mind to grasp it, to cling to it, creating a subtle tension and anxiety that it will slip away. An uncomfortable feeling of sadness appears, and you can feel the immediate aversion, the craving for it to be gone, the resistance that turns the simple pain of sadness into the prolonged suffering of fighting reality. You can see how you have been clinging to identities: I need people to see me as smart, to outcomes, this project has to succeed, or I am a failure, to relationships. My happiness depends on this person loving me. You see with a clarity that is both devastating and liberating that while the first arrow of life's unavoidable pain is real, it is your own mind through its relentless grasping and pushing away that shoots the second, third, and fourth arrows into yourself. The suffering is not what happens to you, it is what you do with what happens to you. The story of the fearsome killer Angulimala illustrates this dawning realization with terrifying power. Angulimala, whose name meant finger necklace, for his gruesome habit of collecting a finger from each of his 99 victims, was the embodiment of someone trapped in the cycle of dukkha and its cause. He was a storm of hatred, delusion, and violence, spreading terror wherever he went. One day, the Buddha began to walk calmly down the path where Angulimala was waiting. Angulimala was shocked by this man's fearlessness and ran to attack him. But despite his great strength, he couldn't catch the slowly walking monk. Exasperated, he screamed, "Stop, monk!" And the Buddha, continuing to walk, replied, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." In that moment, the simple, powerful truth of the Buddha's words cut through Angulimala's lifetime of delusion. He was forced to see himself, to see the endless, frantic, violent motion of his own mind. He saw the mountain of suffering he had created for others and for himself. He saw that its cause was his own blind rage and his clinging to a false identity. This was his moment of truth, a direct, visceral seeing of the first two noble truths. And in the face of that, seeing the entire structure of his murderous ego collapsed, he threw down his weapons and vowed to follow the path of peace. His story is our story, written in blood. The breakdown forces us to see our own violence, our own frantic motion, with a clarity that makes it impossible to continue the same way. When you have been steeped in the first two truths, when you have seen the disease and its cause, a moment of grace can occur. This is the third noble truth, the truth of Nirodha, which means cessation. It is the radical, world-changing news that an end to dukkha is possible. You experience this not as a theory, but as a direct glimpse in the depths of the dark night when you are so exhausted that for one single moment you finally stop fighting. You stop trying to fix the emptiness, and you just surrender. In that moment, a flicker of peace might arise. It is a peace that comes not from adding anything, but from the cessation of struggle. When you successfully sit with your rage and offer it compassion, and you feel its destructive energy soften, the feeling that remains in its place is Nirodha. These moments are tiny fissures in the suffocating prison of the ego. They are brief, they may not last, but they are everything. They are empirical proof gathered by your own experience that peace is your natural state. It is the blue sky that is always present behind the storm clouds. These glimpses transform hope from a desperate, flimsy wish into a tangible, achievable reality. You now know not as a belief, but as a fact that freedom is possible. This direct knowledge of a possible cure naturally leads to the final truth, the fourth noble truth, the truth of Magga, the path. If Nirodha is the prognosis that you can be healed, Magga is the prescription for how to do it. It is the noble eightfold path, a comprehensive set of practices for retraining the mind and liberating it from suffering. At this stage of the breakdown, you don't need to memorize all 8 steps. The realization is more fundamental. It is the dawning, electrifying awareness that there is a way out. You are not doomed to wander in the wilderness of your pain forever. There is a path, a set of tools, a technology of awakening that has been tested and refined for millennia. This realization is the light at the end of the long, dark tunnel of the breakdown. It ignites a new kind of energy in you. The aimless despair of the dark night begins to transform into a focused, purposeful resolve. The breakdown has done its work. It has shattered your illusions, forced you to see the true nature of your condition, given you a glimpse of freedom, and placed your feet at the beginning of a path that leads to it. You are no longer just a victim of a mysterious spiritual ailment. You are a seeker who has been given a diagnosis and a prescription. You are finally ready to consciously engage in your own healing. And so with this raw experiential understanding of your condition burning in your heart, you are no longer just surviving the storm. You are ready to learn how to navigate it. You are ready for the first, most essential tool on this path, the life raft, that will allow you to stay afloat in the turbulent waters of your own mind. You are ready to learn the true practice of mindfulness. Having been brought to your knees by the raw, undeniable reality of the Four Noble Truths, you now stand at the entrance to the path forward. You have seen the nature of the dis-ease, you have understood its cause, and you have glimpsed the possibility of freedom. Now you need a tool. You need something to hold onto in the turbulent, churning waters of your own mind. This is where we introduce the practice of mindfulness. But we must be very careful here, for the word mindfulness in our modern culture has been largely stripped of its profound power. It has been commercialized and packaged as a life hack for corporate productivity, a simple relaxation technique to de-stress after a busy day. While it can certainly be helpful in those contexts for the person navigating the storm of a spiritual breakdown, mindfulness is something far more vital, far more primal. It is not a luxury spa treatment. It is a life raft. It is the first, most essential skill of a spiritual warrior, the art of learning how to be present with reality, no matter how terrifying that reality may seem. At its heart, mindfulness, or sati in the original Pali language of the Buddha, is the practice of cultivating a bare, non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. It is the simple yet radical act of paying attention to what is actually happening, as it is happening, without immediately layering on our habitual commentary, our stories, our judgments, and our reactions. It is the practice of becoming an impartial witness to your own experience. When a thought arises, you see it simply as a thought, a transient mental event, not as an absolute truth. When a feeling of anger surfaces, you feel it as a raw, energetic sensation in the body, a tightness in the chest, a heat in the face, rather than immediately being swept away by the narrative of righteous indignation. The key to this practice is the quality of non-judgment. In the midst of the inner war of the breakdown, you are not asked to create peace. You are asked to declare a ceasefire. You lay down the weapons of self-criticism and self-analysis and simply observe the battlefield with a gentle, open curiosity. In the heat of the storm, however, simply trying to be aware can feel impossible, like trying to observe a hurricane from a paper boat. The waves of intense emotion and the gale-force winds of chaotic thought will capsize you in an instant. This is why the first practical step of mindfulness is to find an anchor. An anchor is a spot in your present moment experience that you can return to again and again to steady yourself when you are lost in the storm. The most common and reliable anchor is the breath. Your breath is always with you, and it is always happening now. The practice can be as simple as finding a place to sit, closing your eyes, and bringing your full attention to the physical sensation of the breath entering your body and the sensation of the breath leaving your body. Feel the coolness at the tip of the nostrils on the in-breath, the rise of the abdomen, and then the fall of the abdomen, the subtle warmth on the out-breath. Your mind will wander 1,000 times. That is what minds do. The practice is not to have a perfectly still mind. The practice is each time you notice your mind has wandered into a story about the past or a worry about the future, to gently and without judgment acknowledge where it has gone, and then kindly escort your attention back to the anchor of the breath, again and again and again. Your body can also be an anchor. The feeling of your feet planted firmly on the floor, the sensation of gravity holding your body in a chair. These physical sensations are always in the present. They are your safe harbor, your point of return. This practice doesn't stop the storm, but it teaches you how to anchor your vessel so that you are not swept away by it. The purpose of this anchoring is beautifully illustrated in the Buddha's parable of the second arrow. He taught that in life we are all inevitably shot by a first arrow. This is the unavoidable pain of existence: sickness, loss, disappointment, betrayal. The breakdown itself is a first arrow. It is painful and it is real. The problem, the Buddha said, is that most of us, immediately after being hit by the first arrow, proceed to shoot ourselves with a second one. This second arrow is our reaction to the pain. It is our resistance, our mental proliferation, our storytelling. It is the thought, this shouldn't be happening to me. This is a catastrophe. I can't bear it. My life is ruined. This second arrow is not an external event. It is entirely self-inflicted, and it is the cause of the vast majority of our suffering, our dukkha. A wise person, A mindful person still gets hit by the first arrow. They do not bypass the pain. They feel the sharp, clean sting of it. But through their practice, they have created a small space of awareness between the event and their reaction. They have trained themselves not to automatically reach for that second arrow. Mindfulness is the art of tending to the wound of the first arrow with compassion and presence, without stabbing yourself again and again. The breakdown is the first arrow. Your practice is to feel the disillusionment, the fear, the emptiness, without adding the second arrow of "I am a failure. I am going crazy. There is something fundamentally wrong with me." A powerful technique that emerges from this practice is what modern neuroscience calls naming it to tame it. When a powerful and overwhelming emotion like anxiety arises, instead of being consumed by it, you can use your mindful awareness to gently place a label on it. As you feel the familiar tightening in your chest and the racing thoughts, you can say to yourself softly and internally, "Anxiety. This is what anxiety feels like." When a torrent of self-critical thoughts floods your mind, you can label it judging. This is judging. This simple act is incredibly powerful. By naming the experience, you are disidentifying from it. It is no longer "I am anxious." It is "There is anxiety here, and I am the one who is aware of it." This creates a crucial gap between the stimulus and your response. It shifts you from being the actor caught in the drama to being the audience watching the drama unfold. Neurologically, this act of verbal labeling engages the higher, more rational parts of the brain, which in turn helps to soothe the brain's primitive alarm system. You are taming the wild energies of the mind by meeting them with calm, clear-eyed recognition. As you continue this patient practice of anchoring, witnessing, and naming, a profound insight begins to dawn, not as an idea but as a direct lived experience. You start to see in high definition that nothing lasts. This is the experiential realization of anicca, or impermanence. You sit and watch a gigantic wave of grief so powerful you think it might kill you rise up crest, and then inevitably it begins to soften, to shrink, to dissolve. You witness a ferocious storm of angry thoughts possess your mind, and then without you doing anything other than watching, it blows itself out, leaving behind a quiet stillness. You learn through hundreds of these small observations that you are not your thoughts because your thoughts are constantly changing. You are not your emotions because your emotions are as fleeting as clouds in the sky. Your true nature is the sky itself, the vast, open, unchanging awareness in which these temporary weather patterns of thought and feeling arise and pass away. This realization is the seed of true liberation. It gives you the unshakable courage to be with even the most painful states, because you now know from your own direct experience that they are temporary. This too shall pass, ceases to be a comforting platitude, and becomes a fundamental law of the universe that you have verified for yourself. You learn to ride the waves of life, knowing they cannot drown you because you are not the wave, you are the ocean. And so mindfulness is not an escape from the pain of your breakdown. It is a radical immersion into it, but with a new quality of awareness. It is the tool that allows you to stay present with the wreckage, to feel the pain without being defined by it, to witness the chaos without becoming it. As you patiently practice this art of mindful awareness, of staying present with what is, you begin to see the architecture of your own prison with startling clarity. You see the bars, you see the locks, and you see the chains. You see in real time the root mechanism of suffering, the desperate reflexive act of clinging to what you want and pushing away what you don't. And this clear seeing gives rise to the next great task of the path. You are now ready to learn the art of letting go. With the life raft of mindfulness, you have learned not to capsize in the stormy seas of your own experience. You have learned to anchor yourself in the present moment, to witness the waves of thought and emotion without being swept away. But mindfulness is only the first step. It is the diagnostic tool that allows you to see with painful clarity the very mechanism of your suffering, the constant reflexive habit of grasping at what you want and pushing away what you don't. You can now see the second arrow as you prepare to shoot it. The next stage of the path is learning how to not shoot it. It is the art of putting down the bow. This is the art of surrender, the true meaning of letting go. In our culture, which is built on the ideals of striving, conquering, and winning, the word surrender is deeply misunderstood. It is equated with weakness, with defeat, with giving up. But in the context of the spiritual journey, surrender is an act of profound courage, wisdom, and strength. It is not passive resignation. It is an active, intelligent, and graceful yielding to the flow of reality, a reality that your mindfulness practice has shown you that you cannot and were never meant to control. It is the cessation of the war against what is. It is the realization that your suffering comes not from the circumstances of your life, but from your fierce, brutal, and ultimately futile battle against them. Surrender is the moment you finally see the utter insanity of this war, and you willingly, consciously lay down your arms. The first thing we must surrender is our addiction to control. The human ego is a master strategist, a control freak extraordinaire. It believes that if it can just think hard enough, plan meticulously enough, and manage every variable, it can force life to conform to its desires and protect itself from pain. The spiritual breakdown is life's devastatingly effective way of showing you that this belief is a complete illusion. You cannot control what others think of you. You cannot control whether loss or sickness will visit your door. You cannot control the chaotic, unpredictable arising and passing away of your own thoughts and emotions. The attempt to do so is the source of immense and constant exhaustion. It is like trying to command the tides or schedule the sunrise. Surrender is the profound relief of finally admitting defeat in this impossible task. It is the exhale you didn't know you were waiting to make. It's looking up at the vast, complex, and uncontrollable tapestry of life and saying, I don't know, I am not in charge. And in that admission, a strange and wonderful lightness begins to dawn. By letting go of the burden of false control, you open yourself up to the guidance of a deeper intelligence that has been waiting for you to get out of its way. More subtly and more profoundly, we must learn to surrender our narratives. What we are truly clinging to is not people, places, or things, but the stories we tell ourselves about them. These stories are the building blocks of the ego. There is the story of the victim, a narrative of past wounds that we keep alive by replaying it over and over, because the identity of being wronged feels solid and validating. There is the story of the successful one, a narrative of achievements and accolades that we desperately try to maintain because we fear we are nothing without it. There is even the story of the spiritual seeker, a heroic tale of struggle and striving that can become just another identity, another way of feeling special and separate. The practice of surrender is the practice of letting these stories go. In meditation and in life, when you notice one of these familiar narratives starting to play, you see it with mindfulness. You acknowledge it without judgment. The story of how I was misunderstood, and then you gently release your grip on it, returning your attention to the raw, unfiltered sensory reality of the present moment. You are choosing reality over your story about reality. This feels like a death, because each time you let go of a story, a small piece of the ego you thought you would dies with it. You are surrendering the familiar prison of your personal history for the terrifying freedom of the unknown present. There is a powerful story that illustrates this process perfectly. A man found himself on the bank of a raging river that he needed to cross. He was a strong and confident swimmer, so he dove in and began to fight his way directly across his powerful strokes, battling the immense force of the current. But the river was too strong. For every foot he gained, the current pushed him back too. He was exhausting himself, swallowing water, and beginning to panic as he was swept downstream. He was losing the fight. This is the state of the ego battling the breakdown. In a moment of sheer desperation and exhaustion, the man did the last thing his instincts wanted him to do. He stopped fighting. He surrendered. He let his body go limp, turned onto his back, and allowed the current to take him. The river, which moments before had been his mortal enemy, was now his vehicle. It carried him swiftly and effortlessly. He was swept far downstream from where he started, and he did not land on the opposite bank at the precise spot his mind had intended. But he did land safely and alive on the other side. The surrender did not lead to his death. It was the only thing that could have saved him. It took him not where his ego wanted to go, but where life, the river, needed him to go. This story reveals the next crucial layer of surrender, letting go of the outcome. The man had to release his attachment to landing at a specific destination. For the spiritual seeker, this is perhaps the most difficult surrender of all. We begin the path with a goal in mind. We want enlightenment, we want bliss, we want peace, we want the pain to end. We become attached to the idea of the breakthrough. We read books and create a detailed map of what awakening should look like, and then we judge our experience when it doesn't match the map. This very desire for a specific outcome becomes the ultimate form of clinging. It is the ego co-opting the spiritual journey for its own purposes. True surrender is letting go of the need for the journey to be anything other than what it is right now. It is the willingness to be in the dark night for as long as it takes without demanding a sunrise. It is the willingness to feel the pain of the breakdown without demanding a breakthrough. It is the ultimate act of trust. It is trusting that the river knows its own way to the ocean, and that your job is not to navigate but simply to float. Herein lies the great paradox of this path. In a world that glorifies resistance and struggle, surrender appears to be an act of weakness. But in the inner world, it is the key to all genuine power. As long as the man was fighting the river, he was pitting his own finite muscular strength against the immense, inexhaustible power of the water. It was a battle he was guaranteed to lose. The moment he surrendered, he was no longer fighting the river's power. He was moving with it. He had tapped into a force infinitely greater than himself. This is the difference between the rigid oak tree that stands proud and defiant against the storm wind until it snaps in two, and the supple bamboo that bends all the way to the ground, and then when the wind passes, springs back up, unharmed. The spiritual path is not about becoming an immovable oak. It is about learning the profound, resilient, and unbeatable strength of the bamboo. It is about discovering that true power is found not in assertion but in yielding, not in resistance but in alignment with the flow of reality as it is. This constant practice of surrendering to the present moment, of letting go of the war against what is, begins to cultivate a profound new quality of being. It moves beyond the active struggle of letting go and into a state of deep abiding peace with reality exactly as it unfolds. You begin to learn not just how to surrender to reality, but how to radically accept it. The courageous act of surrender, of consciously laying down your arms in the war against reality, is the doorway. But what is the room that you enter? That room is a state of being known as radical acceptance. If surrender is the active process of letting go of the rope in a tug-of-war with life, acceptance is the quiet, spacious peace that arises when you are no longer pulling. It is a shift from doing to being. It is a subtle yet profound evolution from fighting reality to resting in it. This is not a state of passive resignation or defeated apathy. It is a vibrant, intelligent, and deeply engaged peace, a peace that can hold the entirety of the human experience in all its beauty and its horror within a tender and unbreakable embrace. Before we go any further, we must dismantle the single greatest obstacle to this practice, the misunderstanding that acceptance means condoning. Our minds conditioned to fight for justice and protect ourselves from harm rebel at the idea of accepting a painful or unjust situation. To be clear, radical acceptance does not mean that you approve of harmful behavior. It does not mean you should stay in an abusive situation. It does not mean you should not work to change the world for the better. In fact, it is the only solid ground from which wise and effective action can be taken. You cannot change a reality that you are refusing to see clearly. Acceptance is simply the courageous act of looking at the present moment, exactly as it is, without the distorting filter of the thought, "This shouldn't be happening." You must first accept the isness of the situation. You accept that your partner is acting in a hurtful way. You accept that you have lost your job. You accept that you are feeling immense grief. You accept the raw, undeniable facts of the present moment, including your own emotional and visceral reactions to them. Only from this place of clear-eyed, non-resistant seeing can you then choose how to respond in a way that is effective, intelligent, and truly serves your well-being. The inner practice of acceptance can be distilled into a single powerful word: yes. The ego's habitual reflexive response to any form of pain, physical, emotional, or mental, is number. It's a contraction, a pushing away, a denial. No, I don't want this feeling of anxiety. No, this back pain shouldn't be here. No, this situation is unacceptable. This no is the second arrow. It is the fuel of resistance that turns pain into suffering. Radical acceptance is the practice of meeting every moment, especially the difficult ones, with a gentle internal yes. When a wave of fear washes over you, instead of fighting it, You breathe into it and whisper to yourself, yes. This is here now. When you are stuck in traffic and feeling rage, you acknowledge it. Yes, there is anger. There is impatience. This is not a yes of desire, as in, yes, I want more of this pain. It is a yes of acknowledgement of truth. It is aligning yourself with reality rather than fighting it. It is a simple, profound statement that says, I will not add the suffering of resistance to the pain that is already present. This tiny word, this simple shift from no to yes, is the end of the inner war. How does this practice dissolve suffering? Imagine you are trying to hold a large inflatable beach ball underwater. The beach ball is a painful emotion like grief or shame. The act of holding it down is resistance. It takes an enormous amount of constant energy and vigilance. You can't focus on anything else because you're so busy keeping the ball submerged. And despite your best efforts, it keeps trying to pop up at unexpected and inconvenient moments. This is what we do with our pain. We spend our lives trying to hold it down, and we are exhausted by the effort. Acceptance is the act of simply letting go. You release your grip. The beach ball doesn't vanish. It shoots to the surface. It bobs around sometimes uncomfortably for a while, but now it is in the open, held by the vastness of the water and the air. The currents of awareness can move it. The light can shine on it, and eventually it will drift away on its own. Resistance is what keeps an emotion trapped in your system. Acceptance allows the energy of the emotion to flow. By giving a painful feeling the space to simply exist, without fighting it or feeding it with stories, you allow it to complete its natural life cycle, to arise, to be felt, and in its own time to pass away. The great Zen master Hakuin provides a legendary example of this unshakable peace born of acceptance. At the height of his career, when he was revered throughout Japan, a young woman in his village became pregnant. Terrified of her parents' wrath, she named Hakuin as the father. Her family, incandescent with rage, stormed to the temple with the newborn baby and publicly accused the master of hypocrisy and depravity. His reputation was instantly shattered. His followers were horrified as the family screamed insults and threw the baby at him. Hakuin's only reply was a calm and simple, "Is that so?" He accepted this new catastrophic reality without a moment of resistance. For the next year, he lived in disgrace, lovingly caring for the child. He lost his followers, he was treated as a pariah, and he had to go door to door begging for milk from his neighbors, enduring their scorn, all to keep the baby alive. Then the young mother, overcome with remorse, confessed the truth to her parents. The father was actually a young man from the fish market. The family, utterly mortified, went back to Hakuin, bowing and scraping profusely, apologizing, begging for his forgiveness, and asking for the baby back. As he gently handed the child over, Hakuin's response was exactly the same as it had been a year before. Is that so? His inner peace had never been touched. He was not attached to the story of Hakuin the great master, nor was he attached to the story of Hakuin the disgraced monk. He simply met the reality of each moment, the accusation, the baby, the apology, the departure, with a complete and total yes. He showed us that freedom is not dependent on having pleasant circumstances, but on our ability to radically accept all circumstances without resistance. This brings us to the ultimate practice of acceptance on this path, the acceptance of the breakdown itself. It is the willingness to look at the entire chaotic, painful, disorienting process of your awakening, and to say yes to it. To accept the dark night as a necessary winter for the soul. To accept the loss of friends as a painful but purposeful pruning. To accept the terror of the ego's death as a sacred rite of passage. It is the final surrender of the ego's most persistent story, the story that your life should be different than it is. It is a profound act of trust, not in a specific outcome, but in the inherent wisdom of the process itself. It is trusting that the river of your life knows its way, even when it is carrying you through terrifying rapids and dark underground caverns. It is the faith that you are not being broken, but broken open. This practice of meeting your own pain and the world's chaos with this radical, unconditional yes begins to work a profound alchemy within you. As you learn to hold your own suffering with this spacious, non-judgmental acceptance, a new quality inevitably begins to bloom in that space. You cannot look upon your own woundedness with such tenderness without that tenderness beginning to overflow. The ground of your heart, softened by acceptance, becomes the fertile soil for the most beautiful flower of the spiritual path to grow. This is the birth of genuine compassion. In the quiet, open space created by radical acceptance, something new begins to grow. When you finally stop fighting your own experience, when you meet your pain, your fear, and your emptiness with a gentle and unconditional, yes, the hardened defensive shell around your heart begins to soften. The energy that was once consumed by the inner war, the energy of resistance, judgment, and control, is now liberated. And this freed energy naturally transforms into a warm and flowing tenderness. This is the birth of compassion. In the Buddhist tradition, this is karuna, the trembling of the heart in the face of suffering. It is the beautiful, unexpected flower that grows directly out of the soil of your own accepted pain. It is the beginning of the end of the breakdown and the first true light of the breakthrough. The entire journey up to this point has been a process of systematic demolition, shattering the foundations of the ego. One of the primary structures to be demolished is pride. Before the breakdown, we may have carried a subtle, often unconscious sense of arrogance. We may have felt secretly superior to others, more in control, more intelligent, more put together. We may have looked upon the suffering of others, the addict on the street, the person weeping over a loss, the one consumed by rage, with a sense of pity which is a form of separation. That poor person, we might have thought, I'm glad I'm not like them. The breakdown obliterates this illusion. Being brought to your own knees, wrestling with your own demons in the dark, feeling your own mind fragment into chaos, this is the ultimate antidote to pride. It is a profound humiliation. In the truest sense of the word, it brings you down to the humble ground of our shared human condition. Now, when you look at the suffering of another, you no longer see a stranger. You see a reflection. In their despair, you recognize your own dark night. In their fear, you recognize your own ego's death throes. In their confusion, you recognize your own sense of being lost. The wall of separation between me and them dissolves, and you realize in a way that is visceral and unshakable that we are all in this together. This recognition is the gateway to true empathy. This newfound empathy must first be directed inward. For most of our lives, we have treated ourselves with a harshness we would never dream of inflicting on a friend. Our inner landscape has been ruled by a relentless inner critic, a drill sergeant who whips us into shape with criticism, shame, and judgment. We believe this harshness is necessary for success and self-improvement, but the breakdown shows us that this inner tyrant is the primary architect of our own suffering. The practice of compassion begins with a courageous rebellion against this tyrant. It begins with learning to offer yourself what is known as metta, or loving kindness. It is the simple, radical act of turning toward your own pain with the tenderness of a loving mother holding her sick child. The practice can be as simple as placing a hand over your own heart, feeling its warmth, and offering yourself phrases of kindness. May I be safe. May I be free from harm. May I be happy. May I live with ease. At first, this can feel awkward, even impossible. The inner critic will mock it as sentimental nonsense. But with patient practice, something begins to melt. You are learning to soothe yourself, to hold yourself, to offer yourself the unconditional love you may have always been seeking from the outside world. You are learning to be your own sanctuary. From this foundation of self-compassion, an authentic compassion for others can finally flow. Any compassion that does not include yourself is ultimately incomplete, often a subtle form of egoic performance designed to make you feel good about yourself. But when you have truly sat with your own shadow, when you have held your own shame and fear with metta, your ability to meet others is transformed. Your own wound becomes a bridge, not a barrier. When you encounter someone lashing out in anger instead of reacting with judgment, you can now see the frightened, wounded part of them that is driving the behavior, because you have met and learned to love that same frightened part within yourself. When you see someone consumed by grief, you can be with them in their pain without trying to fix it, because you know that your own grief simply needed to be held, not fixed. Your personal suffering, which once felt like an isolating curse, is revealed to be a sacred gift. It is the very thing that connects you to the heart of all humanity. It is the key that unlocks a deep, non-sentimental and powerful empathy for all beings, because you understand on a cellular level the nature of their struggle. The story of Kisagutami is perhaps the most poignant teaching on this journey from personal grief to universal compassion. Kisa Gautami was a young woman in the time of the Buddha whose only son had died. She was driven mad by grief, unable to accept the reality of his death. Clutching the small, lifeless body, she wandered through her village, going from house to house, desperately begging for a medicine that could restore her child to life. Some pitied her, some mocked her, but no one could help her. Finally, someone directed her to the Buddha. She burst before him, laid her son at his feet, and pleaded for a miracle. The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion and said, "There is only one thing that can help you. But first, you must do something for me. Go back into the village and bring me a single mustard seed from a house where no one has ever died." Hope surged in Kisa Gautami's heart. A mustard seed was a simple thing to find. She began her quest, immediately going from door to door. At the first house, she asked, "Have you a mustard seed I can take to the enlightened one?" Of course, the woman replied. "But tell me, has anyone in this house ever died?" The woman's face fell. "Oh yes. My beloved husband passed away just last year." Kisa Gautami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was the same everywhere. "We have plenty of mustard seeds, but our eldest son was taken by a fever. My parents died in this very room. We have lost more loved ones than we can count." As she moved through the village, her frantic personal quest transformed. Her focus shifted from her own unique, isolating agony to the vast shared ocean of human loss. She realized that every single family was touched by the same sorrow that was consuming her. Her heart, once clenched tight around her own pain, began to break open to hold the pain of everyone. Her sharp, personal, "Why me?" dissolved into a soft, universal, "Oh, all of us." In that moment of profound, compassionate realization, she was healed. Not because her son was returned to her, but because her heart had expanded to encompass the first noble truth for all beings. She had found freedom not by escaping suffering, but by connecting with it through compassion. This is the alchemy of the path. Compassion is the philosopher's stone that turns the lead of raw, meaningless pain into the gold of wisdom and connection. Pain that is met with the cold armor of resistance festers into trauma. Pain that is met with the frantic energy of fear becomes chronic anxiety. But pain that is held in the warm, gentle, and spacious embrace of compassion begins to melt, to soften, to transform. This is the true turning point of the journey. This is where the energy shifts from breakdown to breakthrough. The chaotic, destructive forces that tore your world apart now begin to find a new constructive purpose. They are no longer just demolishing the old false structures. They are now being repurposed as the building materials for a new foundation, a foundation built on love, empathy, and a deep sense of connection to all life. The gentle rain of compassion allows life to begin to grow again in the scorched and barren field of the dark night. With the heart softened and opened by compassion, you are no longer just surviving the breakdown. You are beginning to harvest its gifts. The chaotic energies that once felt so destructive now begin to coalesce and crystallize into profound moments of clarity. This is the first light of dawn after the long, dark night. This is the birth of genuine wisdom. When the heart has been tenderized by compassion, a new clarity begins to dawn in the mind. The churning, muddy waters of the breakdown, stirred up by the ego's frantic struggle, have been allowed to settle through the quiet grace of acceptance and self-love. In the stillness that follows, you can finally see through the water to the very bottom. This seeing is not the analytical thinking of the intellect. It is a direct, intuitive, and unshakable knowing that arises from the depths of your being. This is prajna, the Sanskrit word for transcendent wisdom. It is the dawn that follows the dark night, the profound insight that emerges from the ashes of your old self. It is crucial to understand that prajna is not the same as knowledge. Knowledge is the accumulation of facts and concepts. You can read every Buddhist scripture ever written. You can memorize the philosophical frameworks. You can become a scholar of enlightenment and still not possess a single drop of prajna. Knowledge is a map. Wisdom is the direct experience of the territory itself. Consider a brilliant astrophysicist who has spent her entire life studying the theory of relativity and the laws of celestial mechanics. She can write complex equations describing the Earth's rotation and its journey through the cosmos. She knows intellectually that the planet is a sphere spinning through space at an incredible speed. But one evening, as she watches the sun dip below the horizon, the boundary between her intellectual knowledge and her lived reality dissolves. For a fleeting, breathtaking moment, she doesn't just know it, she feels it. She feels the immense silent turning of the planet under her feet. She feels herself not as a static observer on a solid ground, but as a participant in a vast cosmic dance. In that instant, the equations become poetry, the theory becomes a visceral truth. The knowledge has moved from her head to her bones. That is prajna. It is the wisdom that arises when you stop looking at the world and begin to experience it directly. The breakdown process, by destroying your reliance on old concepts and beliefs, forces you into this state of direct, unmediated seeing. The first great insight that dawns in this clarity is a profound gut-level understanding of anicca, or impermanence. Through your mindfulness practice, you have already been observing the fleeting nature of your thoughts and feelings. But prajna takes this observation to a whole new level. You don't just notice that a sad feeling passes. You see into the very nature of all emotion as transient energetic weather. You don't just acknowledge that your body is aging. You feel the constant cellular hum of change and flux within you. You see that everything you once thought was solid, your personality, your relationships, your career, your very body, is in fact a process, a flickering, ever-changing dance of energy. This is not a depressing realization. It is the most liberating truth you can ever experience. It is the key that unlocks the prison of clinging. Why would you exhaust yourself trying to grasp a fistful of water? Why would you build your identity on something as unstable as a cloud formation? Seeing the radical impermanence of everything frees you from this futile, exhausting struggle. It allows you to participate in life with a new lightness and grace. You can love more deeply because you know the moment is precious and fleeting. You can experience joy more fully because you are not desperately trying to freeze it in time. You learn to hold everything in life with an open hand, appreciating its beauty as it passes through, rather than crushing it with the closed fist of attachment. As your grip on the permanence of things dissolves, a deeper and more startling insight arises: the truth of anatta, or no self. This is often the most misunderstood of the Buddha's teachings. It does not mean that you cease to exist. It means that the separate, solid, continuous self that you have always believed yourself to be cannot be found upon investigation. Having seen that you are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not your body, and not your history, the question, well then, who am I, becomes intensely alive. The insight of anatta is the realization that this question has no answer, because the questioner itself is an illusion. You begin to have moments where the sense of being a separate doer inside your head simply vanishes. Perhaps it happens while you are washing the dishes, and there is no you washing the dishes, but simply the warm water, the soap, the motion of hands. Perhaps it happens while looking at a flower, and for a split second, the boundary between the observer and the observed melts away, and there is only seeing, only color, only beauty. You realize you are not a noun but a verb. You are not a separate wave but a momentary expression of the entire ocean. This is not a cold, nihilistic emptiness. It is a joyful, liberating, and profoundly interconnected one. It is the end of the burden of the separate self, the end of the lonely, anxious ego that must protect and defend itself at all times. It is the experience of coming home to the vast, seamless whole of existence. These two insights, impermanence and no self, naturally lead to the third great dawn of wisdom, a direct seeing into paticca samuppada, or dependent origination. This is the understanding that nothing, absolutely nothing, exists in isolation. Everything arises in dependence upon other factors. That flower you are looking at exists only because of the confluence of the sun, the rain, the soil, the worm, the bee, and the gardener. It has no separate, independent existence. It is a momentary gathering of the entire universe. And so it is with you. Your sense of happiness is not created by you. It arises dependent on your night's sleep, the food you ate, the kind word someone offered, and the sunlight streaming through the window. The anger that flashes through you is not your anger. It arises dependent on a past memory, a current insecurity, a hormonal fluctuation, and the story you are telling yourself about a particular event. When you see this intricate, infinite web of interconnected causality, the entire structure of blame and guilt collapses. How can you hold on to anger at someone when you see that their actions are the result of a million causes and conditions stretching back through their entire life and the lives of their ancestors? How can you marinate in guilt when you see that your own actions were not born from a solid evil you, but arose from a complex and impersonal web of conditioning? Blame is replaced by a deep, compassionate understanding. You see that all of us are simply expressions of this vast, interconnected dance, doing the best we can with the causes and conditions that have shaped us. These three insights, anicca, anatta, paticca, samuppada, are the core of prajna. They are the wisdom that sets you free. They are not beliefs you adopt, but truths you see directly in the fabric of your own experience, thanks to the clarifying fire of the breakdown. The scientist didn't need to believe in the Earth's rotation. She felt it. In the same way, you no longer need to believe in these Buddhist concepts. You have lived them. You have seen impermanence in the dissolution of your old life. You have experienced no self in the death of your ego. You have felt dependent origination in the compassion that connects you to all beings. These profound, earth-shattering insights are not the end of the journey. They are the beginning of a new one. They provide the clear, unshakable foundation upon which a new life, an authentic life, can finally be built. You are no longer just clearing the rubble of the old structure. You are now standing on solid ground, ready to consciously rebuild your life, not from the flawed blueprints of the ego, but from the divine architecture of wisdom itself. After the purifying fire of the breakdown and the clarifying dawn of wisdom, a new phase of the journey begins. The old ego-driven life has been burned to the ground. The soil has been tilled by suffering, fertilized by compassion, and is now ready for new growth. You stand on the solid foundation of what you have seen directly, the truths of impermanence, no self, and interconnectedness. Now the work is not one of deconstruction, but of reconstruction. This is not about rebuilding the same old house with its faulty wiring and cracked foundations. It is about allowing a new kind of life to grow organically from this new ground. A life built not on fear and illusion, but on the unshakable bedrock of reality itself. The most fundamental shift in this new life is the change in your inner compass. The old life was driven by the twin engines of the ego, fear and desire. Your choices were dictated by a fear of failure, a fear of judgment, a fear of scarcity, a fear of not being enough. And they were fueled by a desire for approval, a desire for status, a desire for pleasure, a desire for security. This created a life of constant, anxious striving, a life of shoulds and have-tos, a life spent chasing external validation. But the breakdown has exposed this game as a hollow pursuit. Now a new guidance system comes online. It is the quiet, unwavering voice of your own inner wisdom, your prajna informed by the open heart of your compassion, your karuna. Decisions are no longer made by running a frantic cost-benefit analysis of what will make you look good or what will keep you safe. Instead, you learn to listen to a deeper current. You begin to ask different questions. What feels most true in this moment? What action would be an expression of love? What does my deepest self, the wisdom beyond the ego, know to be the right path here? This is a shift from a life that is pushed from without to a life that is pulled from within. It is the beginning of living a life of authentic purpose. A purpose that is not a grand egoic mission, but a simple moment-to-moment alignment with truth and love. With this new inner guidance, and with the silencing of the harsh inner critic, an incredible new freedom of expression emerges. For years, your authentic creativity may have been held hostage by the ego's fear of judgment. The part of you that wanted to paint, to write poetry, to sing, to dance, to build things with your hands, was silenced by the voice that said, "You're not talented enough. People will think it's foolish. What's the point if you can't be the best?" Having faced the death of your ego, these threats now seem laughably small. What power does the fear of looking foolish have to a person who has walked through the dark night of the soul? And so you begin to create again, not for fame, not for money, not for applause, but for the sheer, unadulterated joy of the creative act itself. It is a return to the state of childlike play. You are no longer creating to prove your worth, but simply allowing the life force within you to express itself through you. This authentic creativity is not limited to the arts. It infuses everything you do. The way you solve a problem at work, the way you cook a meal, the way you arrange flowers in a vase, all become acts of creative, joyful expression, free from the heavy burden of perfectionism. This entire process of rebuilding can be perfectly understood through the ancient Japanese art of kintsugi. When a cherished piece of pottery is broken, the kintsugi master does not try to hide the damage. He does not glue the pieces back together with an invisible adhesive, pretending the break never happened. Instead, he meticulously reassembles the vessel and then highlights the cracks with a lacquer mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. The philosophy is profound. The object is not considered ruined or less valuable because it was broken. It is considered more beautiful, more precious, and more resilient. The shimmering gold lines do not hide the scars. They celebrate them. They tell the story of the object's journey, its history of trauma, and its recovery. They are a testament to the fact that it has been shattered and yet has been made whole again. This is the perfect metaphor for the rebuilt human soul. The breakdown is the shattering of our ceramic self. The painful cracks are our wounds, our traumas, our failures, our dark night. We are not asked to hide them or pretend they don't exist. Instead, we are invited to mend ourselves with the liquid gold of our own wisdom and self-compassion. The healed person is not someone who has erased their scars. They are someone whose scars have become lines of shimmering gold. Your past pain, when held with loving awareness, is what gives you your depth, your character, your strength, and your unique beauty. You are a living work of kintsugi, more whole, not in spite of being broken, but because of it. As you begin to live from this new foundation, your value system undergoes a radical recalibration. Having seen the ultimate emptiness of the ego's pursuits, there is a natural falling away of the frantic desire for more. A gravitation towards simplicity begins. The need for constant stimulation, for endless entertainment, for the next big purchase or the next peak experience quiets down. It is replaced by a deep and profound appreciation for the richness of the ordinary. A simple cup of tea, savored with full attention, becomes a moment of complete contentment. A walk in the park becomes a deep communion with nature. A genuine, unguarded conversation with a friend becomes a source of immense nourishment. You discover that joy is not something to be pursued in the future, but something to be discovered in the texture of the present moment. This is not an enforced ascetic simplicity. It is not about punishing yourself or denying yourself pleasure. It is a natural consequence of wisdom. When you are no longer trying to fill the inner void with external things, you discover that the void was never empty in the first place. It was full of the quiet, simple, and profound beauty of life itself. Perhaps the most telling sign of this new life is the emerging capacity to hold life's paradoxes. The egoic mind is a binary machine. It thinks in terms of either or. Something is good or bad, right or wrong, a success or a failure. The integrated consciousness that emerges after the breakdown is able to hold the both and of reality. You find that you can feel a deep, heartbreaking sorrow for the suffering of the world, while at the same time feeling an overflowing sense of gratitude and joy simply for being alive. You can be fully committed to a goal, working with diligence and passion, while at the same time being completely unattached to whether you achieve it or not. You can experience the full range of messy, flawed, and difficult human emotions, anger, sadness, fear, while simultaneously resting in the deep quiet knowing of your true nature as vast, peaceful awareness. You no longer need life to be neat and tidy. You can stand comfortably in the messy, paradoxical, and beautiful complexity of it all. This ability to hold opposites without needing to resolve them is the source of incredible resilience, flexibility, and a peace that surpasses all understanding. This new life, built on the foundation of wisdom and held together by the golden lacquer of compassion, is characterized by a profound sense of ease and liberation. But this freedom is perhaps different from the one we imagined when we first set out on this path. It is not an escape from the difficulties of life, but a freedom to engage with them fully without being destroyed by them. It is a freedom that must be understood in a new and more profound light. The new life that grows from the ashes of the breakdown, a life built on the foundation of wisdom and held together with the golden lacquer of compassion, is characterized by a profound sense of freedom. But this is not the kind of freedom the ego dreams about. The ego's vision of freedom is one of escape. It is the fantasy of winning the lottery, and escaping the need to work of finding the perfect partner, and escaping loneliness of achieving perfect health, and escaping pain of moving to a remote island, and escaping the complexities of society. It is a freedom from life. This is a mirage. As long as you take your own uninspected mind with you, you will recreate your prison wherever you go. The true liberation that dawns after the breakthrough is not a freedom from life, but a freedom to live it fully. It is an inner state, not an outer condition. It is the release from a prison far older and more confining than any external circumstance, the prison of your own mind. This is a shift from seeking freedom from to discovering freedom to. Before the breakdown, our lives are a constant negotiation, a desperate attempt to gain freedom from discomfort. We seek freedom from anxiety, freedom from boredom, freedom from difficult people, freedom from our own feelings of inadequacy. This is an endless and exhausting game, because the nature of life is to present us with these very challenges. The liberation that comes with awakening is the discovery of a new kind of freedom. It is the freedom to be with anxiety without being controlled by it. It is the freedom to feel sorrow without drowning in it. It is the freedom to fail without it shattering your sense of self-worth. It is the freedom to love without needing to possess. It is the freedom to respond to the myriad challenges of life with the tools you have cultivated: mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, rather than reacting with the ego's old conditioned patterns of fear, aversion, and grasping. This freedom is not dependent on your circumstances. It is a portable, unshakable capacity that you carry within you, a sanctuary that no external event can ever truly touch. This is the true meaning of nirvana, a word that is so often misunderstood as a blissful, heaven-like paradise you attain after death. The word itself offers a much more practical and immediate meaning. It literally means to extinguish or to blow out, like blowing out a candle flame. The question then is, what is being extinguished? Not your life force, not your unique personality. What is extinguished are the three fires that the Buddha identified as the source of all our suffering. The first is the fire of greed, the relentless thirst, craving, and attachment that keeps us forever dissatisfied. The second is the fire of hatred, the fire of aversion, anger, and resistance to what is. The third is the fire of delusion, the fundamental ignorance of the true nature of reality, the ignorance of impermanence and no self. The entire breakdown process is a powerful fire extinguisher. It starves the fire of greed by revealing the ultimate emptiness of worldly pursuits. It cools the fire of hatred with the gentle rain of compassion, and it blows out the fire of delusion with the clear, strong wind of wisdom. Nirvana, therefore, is not a place you go to. It is a state of psychological freedom available right here, right now, when these inner fires are no longer burning. It is the profound peace, clarity, and ease that remains when the fever of craving and aversion has finally broken. An ancient allegory illustrates this inner freedom perfectly. Imagine two prisoners confined together in the same small dark cell. The first prisoner is consumed by his condition. He spends every waking moment rattling the iron bars, screaming at the guards, kicking the stone walls. He is tormented by memories of his life outside and consumed by obsessive fantasies of escape. His entire world, his entire mind has shrunk to the size of his prison cell. He is a prisoner twice over, once by the physical walls, and again more profoundly by the prison of his own mind. The second prisoner exists in the very same external reality. He sees the same bars, eats the same meager food, feels the same hard floor beneath him. He does not deny his situation. He radically accepts the reality that he is in a cell. But instead of fighting a battle he cannot win with the external walls, he turns his attention inward. He sits quietly in a corner, closes his eyes, and begins to explore the vast, boundless landscape of his own consciousness. He discovers that within him is a space that has no walls, a freedom that has no limits. He learns to travel through inner worlds of peace and insight. The guards can confine his body, but they have no power over his mind. While the first prisoner is utterly enslaved, the second prisoner, in the midst of the very same circumstances, has discovered true liberation. This is the freedom of the awakened mind. This points to a crucial reframing of our life's purpose. Freedom is not the absence of problems. Life will always present problems. Cars will break down, loved ones will get sick, plans will go awry, our bodies will age and fail. This is the nature of existence, the unavoidable first arrow. True freedom is the absence of being a problem to yourself. It is the end of the inner civil war. It is the cessation of the habit of self-torture through worry, self-criticism, rumination, and resistance. When you are no longer at war with your own mind, you can meet the inevitable external problems of life from a place of immense stability and resourcefulness. The world's chaos can rage, but it cannot penetrate the profound peace of your inner sanctuary. You have become the calm, unwavering eye of the hurricane. This state of inner freedom gives rise to a new kind of joy, the joy of non-clinging. Because you have deeply understood impermanence, you are no longer afraid of endings. This allows you to engage with life more fully, more vibrantly than ever before. You can savor the sweetness of a beautiful moment, a lover's embrace, a child's laughter, a spectacular sunset with your whole being precisely because you are not desperately trying to make it last forever. You can drink the nectar of the present moment to the very dregs, knowing that its passing does not diminish its beauty, but in fact defines it. In the same way, you develop the capacity to meet painful and difficult moments with an open and courageous heart. You are no longer terrified of them because you know from your own experience that they too are temporary visitors. They are storm clouds passing through the vast sky of your awareness. This is the ultimate freedom, the ability to dance with the entirety of life, whatever music it happens to be playing. You can dance with joy, you can dance with sorrow, you can dance with success, you can dance with failure. You are free to participate wholeheartedly in the full, rich, messy, and beautiful spectrum of human experience without being captured or defined by any part of it. This profound inner freedom, this realization that you are not the prisoner, but the spacious awareness in which the prison appears, fundamentally changes your relationship with everything. When the self is no longer seen as a separate, isolated entity fighting for its own survival and its own liberation, you begin to experience a deep and unbreakable connection to all that is. You realize that your freedom is not truly complete as long as others are still in chains. You see that your well-being is inextricably woven into the well-being of the whole. This is the realization of interbeing. The profound inner freedom discovered in the ashes of the breakdown does not leave you isolated in a fortress of peace. It does something far more radical. It dissolves the fortress walls entirely. The lonely, separate self you worked so hard to defend and then worked so hard to be free from is revealed to be the very illusion that was blocking your view of reality. When that phantom self evaporates, you are not left with a void. You are left with everything. You step out from the cramped, solitary confinement of me and into the vast, breathing, interconnected landscape of we. This is the dawning of the insight known as interbeing. This term, brought into modern consciousness with such elegance and simplicity by the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, is the experiential fruit of the wisdom of no self or anatta. As long as you believe you are a separate, independent wave in the ocean, your primary concern will be the survival and success of your particular wave. But the breakdown in its ruthless wisdom has allowed you to experience the truth: you are not the wave. You are, and have always been, the entire ocean. The experience of anatta is not a metaphysical negation of your existence. It is the joyful recognition of your true, boundless identity. The loneliness of the separate self was the dream. Interbeing is the awakening. To understand this truth, Thich Nhat Hanh invites us to do something very simple: to look deeply at a single sheet of paper. What do we see? We see a thin white rectangle. But if we look with the eyes of wisdom, the eyes of interbeing, we see much more. We see a cloud floating in the sky, because without the cloud there can be no rain. Without the rain, the tree cannot grow. So the cloud and the rain are in the sheet of paper. We see the logger who cut down the tree. We see his parents who gave birth to him, and the wheat in the field that became his bread. We see the sunshine that nourished the tree, its warmth embedded in every fiber. We see the earth, the minerals, the composted leaves that fed its roots. We see the factory, the machines, the electricity, and the person who transformed the pulp into paper. If we were to remove any one of these elements, if we were to give the sunshine back to the sun, The cloud back to the sky, the logger back to his parents. The sheet of paper could not exist. It is composed entirely of what we might call non-paper elements. It has no separate independent self. Its entire existence is a manifestation of interconnection. To be the paper must interbe with the entire cosmos, and so it is with us. Look deeply into your own hand. What do you see? You see your mother and your father and their parents and all your ancestors stretching back through time, because without them this hand could not be here. You see the farmers who grew the food, that built these cells, the construction workers who built the home that sheltered you, the teachers who taught you the language you used to think. You see the air, the water, the sunlight. You are a momentary, miraculous confluence of the entire universe. The idea of an independent you is a fiction. Your very consciousness is shaped by the culture and language you were born into. Your sense of happiness is inextricably linked to the kindness someone showed you. Your suffering is connected to the suffering of your ancestors and the suffering present in the world around you. To see this is to be humbled and liberated at the same time. The burden of being a solitary self-made hero or a lonely, isolated victim dissolves in the face of this immense, interconnected truth. This realization is the foundation for genuine, effortless, ethical action, and a compassion that is no longer a sentimental choice, but a logical necessity. If we truly are, then the concept of harming another person for my own gain becomes a nonsensical act of self-harm. It is like the left hand declaring war on the right hand, not realizing they are both connected to the same body, nourished by the same heart. When I pollute a river, I am polluting the water that will eventually become the rain that grows my food. When I speak a word of cruelty, I am releasing a vibration of suffering into the shared field of consciousness that I also inhabit. Conversely, every act of kindness, every gesture of generosity, every word of healing is not just a gift to another, it is a contribution to the well-being of the whole system, of which I am an inseparable part. Compassion, karuna, ceases to be a moral should and becomes the only sane response to the way things truly are. It is the natural expression of wisdom, prajna. This vision of reality is not new. It is beautifully encapsulated in an ancient metaphor from the Avatamsaka Sutra, a foundational Buddhist text. It describes the celestial palace of the god Indra, and hanging in this palace is a vast cosmic net that stretches out infinitely in all directions. This is Indra's net. At every single node where the threads of the net cross, there is a single perfectly polished, multifaceted jewel. The miraculous nature of this net is that if you look closely at the surface of any one jewel, you will see reflected in it every other jewel in the entire net, stretching out to infinity. And not only that, but each of the reflections in that single jewel also contains the reflection of all the other jewels, creating an endless holographic cascade of interreflection. The whole is present in every part. Each individual jewel simultaneously contains and is contained by the entire net. There is no jewel that exists on its own. Its very identity is its relationship with all the others. This is not just a beautiful piece of poetry. It is a description of the universe. You are one of those jewels. Your consciousness is a facet reflecting the whole of existence, and the consciousness of every other being is also reflecting the whole. When you truly look at another person, you can see the entire universe reflected there. When one jewel in the net is touched, every jewel in the entire net trembles and reflects the change. This is the ultimate expression of interbeing. It shows that our actions are never in isolation. They ripple out and affect the entire web of existence. This understanding is the ultimate antidote to the profound loneliness that can haunt the human heart. You are never ever alone. You are an essential, irreplaceable node in an infinite shimmering web of light and connection. Your existence is what holds the reflection for everyone else. The realization of interbeing is the great homecoming. The entire journey of the breakdown was the painful process of shattering the illusion of being a single, isolated jewel. The breakthrough is the moment you look up and see, for the first time, the infinite, beautiful, and interconnected net of which you have always been a part. This is not a final destination you arrive at, but a new map for how to walk in the world. It reorients your entire life away from the narrow pursuit of individual gain and toward a joyful participation in the well-being of the whole. And so the question becomes, how does one live day to day with this extraordinary vision? How do you take this cosmic insight and apply it to the simple act of washing the dishes, of speaking to your neighbor, of going to work? This is the integration of practice into daily life, where the path itself becomes the goal. The profound realization of interbeing, the visceral understanding that you are not separate from the whole of existence, is not a final graduation ceremony. There is no certificate of enlightenment handed to you, no cosmic finish line to cross where the work is finally declared done. To believe so is the ego's last and most subtle trap, the attempt to turn awakening into one final, spectacular achievement it can possess. But the breakthrough is not an endpoint. It is the true starting point. It is the moment you are finally given the real map, the moment you are truly equipped to begin the journey. The path does not end with enlightenment. The path is enlightenment expressed in every conscious step, every mindful breath for the rest of your life. One of the first and most humbling discoveries in the life that follows the breakthrough is that the old patterns do not simply vanish overnight. The clouds still gather. There will be days when you feel irritable, days when a wave of sadness washes over you, moments when the old voice of the inner critic pipes up with its familiar judgmental tone. The difference is that now you have a fundamentally new relationship with these states. You have realized that you are the sky, not the clouds. The passing weather of your mind and emotions no longer has the power to define you or to convince you that the sun is gone forever. You have the tools of mindfulness and compassion to meet these states with a spacious, non-reactive awareness. You can see the anger arise without becoming the anger. You can feel the sadness without believing the story of despair it tells. The goal is no longer to achieve a permanent state of bliss or a perpetually sunny inner sky. The goal is to abide in the unwavering recognition of yourself as the sky capable of holding all weather with a deep and loving peace. This shifts the entire focus of the spiritual life away from a frantic, future-oriented striving and into a deep, joyful engagement with the present moment. The ego is always chasing a future destination. When I get that promotion, then I'll be happy. When I find the right partner, then my life will be complete. When I become enlightened, then I will finally be at peace. This defers joy to a future that never arrives. But the awakened mind realizes that liberation is not a future event. It is a present moment practice. The goal is the path itself. Joy is not found at the destination. It is found in the quality of attention you bring to each step of the walk. Every conscious breath is an act of freedom. Every moment of choosing a compassionate response over a reactive one is a moment of enlightenment. The purpose of life is no longer to get somewhere else, but to be fully, completely, and awakefully here. This profound shift is perfectly captured in a simple, yet deeply wise, Zen proverb. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Before the awakening journey, the ordinary person performs their daily tasks. They chop the wood to heat their home, they carry the water to cook their meals. These activities are mundane chores, means to an end. They are often performed mechanically while the mind is lost in a fantasy about the future, a grievance about the past, or a general state of boredom and complaint. The chopping and carrying are obstacles to be gotten through on the way to something more interesting. Then this person goes through the entire transformative process we have been exploring. They experience the breakdown, the dark night, the dawn of wisdom, the realization of no self and interbeing. They have a profound, life-shattering breakthrough. And then what do? They do not levitate. They do not stop eating. They do not abandon their life. They return, and they continue to chop wood and carry water. From the outside, nothing has changed. The external activities are identical, but from the inside, everything has changed. Now, the chopping of the wood is a meditation. Each swing of the axe is perfectly aligned with the breath. The sound of the blade striking the wood is the only sound in the universe. The carrying of the water is a graceful dance. The feeling of the weight of the buckets, the shifting balance of the body, the coolness of the water against the skin, all are experienced with a total loving presence. The chores are no longer means to an end. They are the path itself, rich with the sacredness of the present moment. This is the integration of practice into daily life. You learn that you do not need to be sitting on a special cushion in a quiet room to be practicing your spirituality. Your life exactly as it is becomes your monastery. Washing the dishes ceases to be a chore to be rushed through and becomes an opportunity to practice mindfulness. You feel the warmth of the water on your skin. You see the iridescent shimmer of the soap bubbles. You hear the gentle clink of ceramic on ceramic. In these simple sensory details, you are fully present, you are awake. Driving your car in a traffic jam is no longer a source of rage and frustration, but a mobile meditation hall. Instead of fuming, you can notice the tension in your shoulders and consciously relax them. You can practice compassion, looking at the other drivers not as idiots who are in your way, but as fellow beings, each with their own struggles and destinations, each stuck in the same situation as you. A difficult conversation with a colleague or family member becomes a practice ground for the Four Noble Truths. You can mindfully listen to their words and your own reactions. You can see the clinging and aversion in your own mind. You can choose to speak and act from a place of compassion and wisdom rather than from egoic reactivity. Your entire life, your work, your relationships, your challenges becomes the sacred text. You are studying the living curriculum for your awakening. While much of this practice is internal, the journey of integration cannot and should not be sustained in isolation. One of the three jewels or three refuges in Buddhism, alongside the Buddha, the principle of awakened mind, and the Dharma, the truth or the teachings, is the Sangha. The Sangha is the community of fellow practitioners. The journey of breakdown can feel intensely lonely, but the path of rebuilding is nourished by connection with spiritual friends, Kalyanamitta in Pali. These are the people who speak the same language of the heart. They are the ones with whom you do not need to pretend, the ones who understand the landscape you have traveled through. They act as a mirror, reflecting your own wisdom and clarity back to you when you cannot see it yourself. They offer support and encouragement when old patterns re-emerge, and you in turn offer the same to them. The Sangha is where the abstract realization of interbeing becomes a lived practical reality. It is in the context of a supportive community that you learn to transform the insights of meditation into the skillful art of living and relating with others. And so the life that follows the breakthrough is not an escape from the world, but a deeper, more intimate, and more engaged dance with it. It is about finding the profound in the profane, the sacred in the mundane. The goal is no longer to get rid of pain or to avoid difficulty, but to learn how to use every single experience as fuel for the journey. As you walk this path of mindful engagement, your entire relationship with hardship begins to transform. The inevitable first arrows of life, illness, loss, failure, and disappointment no longer appear as random, meaningless obstacles. You begin to see them in a radically new light, not as problems to be cursed, but as teachers in disguise, as perfectly tailored lessons designed to help you awaken even more deeply. This is the alchemy of turning all of life's experiences, especially the most painful ones, into medicine. To walk the path of awakening in the midst of an ordinary life is not to be granted an exemption from difficulty. The breakthrough is not a magical shield that repels the inevitable pains of human existence. The car will still get a flat tire in the pouring rain. Loved ones will still get sick. Relationships will still face challenges. Disappointment will still knock on your door. The first arrows of life will continue to fly. The fundamental change lies not in the circumstances of your life, but in your capacity to meet them. Before the journey, a minor inconvenience like a flat tire could trigger a cascade of internal suffering, rage, blame, self-pity, a narrative of, "Why does this always happen to me?" that could poison an entire day. But after traveling through the refining fire of the breakdown, you are left with a new and spacious inner world. The flat tire is still a problem to be solved, but it is just that, a practical problem. It is no longer a personal catastrophe. Your capacity to absorb the shocks of life without being thrown into turmoil has expanded exponentially. The world still presents its challenges, but you are no longer creating a second layer of suffering on top of them. This new relationship with difficulty allows you to see life's triggers in a radically new light. An emotional trigger is any event, word, or situation that provokes an outsized, automatic, and often painful reaction in you. It is when someone's casual comment about your work sends you into a spiral of anxiety, or when seeing a happy couple provokes a sharp pang of envy and loneliness. In the old unconscious life, we experience these triggers as attacks. We blame the other person or the situation for making us feel a certain way. But with the clarity of wisdom, we begin to see triggers not as attacks from the outside, but as invaluable messages from within. They are like a divine homing beacon, highlighting with perfect precision the exact locations where we are still not free. They point directly to the ego's remaining pockets of attachment, its unhealed wounds, its deeply grooved stories. The anxiety triggered by the comment on your work points to a lingering attachment to being seen as competent. The envy of the happy couple points to an unhealed belief in your own lack or unworthiness. Seen in this light, a trigger is not an enemy. It is a guru in disguise. It is a perfectly tailored lesson arriving at the perfect time to show you where the next piece of inner work lies. The practice then becomes to meet the trigger not with blind reaction but with mindful curiosity. Ah, there is that familiar feeling. Hello, old friend. What are you here to teach me today? What am I believing in this moment? Where am I still clinging? The perfect metaphor for this transformative process is found in the quiet, hidden world of the oyster. An oyster's life is placid until a foreign body, a grain of sand, a parasite, a fragment of shell manages to invade its soft, vulnerable inner tissue. This is an irritant, a trigger, a source of constant friction and pain. The oyster does not have the ability to expel this irritant. It cannot fight it or run from it, so it does something miraculous. It begins a process of creative acceptance. It starts to secrete a substance called naka, the very essence of its own being, and coats the sharp, irritating grain of sand with it layer after shimmering layer. Over the course of years, this patient, consistent act of coating the source of its pain with its own inner beauty transforms the greatest threat to its well-being into its most precious treasure, a smooth, luminous, and beautiful pearl. We are the oyster. Life will inevitably send us grains of sand, the triggers, the traumas, the pains, the losses. Our practice of mindful, loving awareness is the naka. When we meet an irritant, instead of trying to push it away, we can learn to coat it with the nacre of our compassion. When we feel the sharp edge of a trigger, we can surround it with the spaciousness of our acceptance. Over time, through this patient and consistent practice, we perform the same alchemy as the oyster. We transform our deepest wounds into our greatest wisdom, our most painful experiences into our most luminous pearls of compassion. This alchemical perspective can be cultivated through a powerful and profound meditation practice from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition known as Tonglen, which means giving and taking. This practice is a radical reversal of our normal instinctual relationship with suffering. Our usual habit is to grasp at pleasure and push away pain. Tonglen trains us to do the exact opposite. In this practice, you sit quietly and connect with your breath. On the in-breath, you intentionally and courageously breathe in a pain or suffering. You might start with your own, the anxiety in your chest, the grief in your heart. You visualize it as a thick, dark, heavy smoke, and you draw it into the very core of your being. This is a direct confrontation with your fear of suffering. You are willingly taking it in. Then, having brought it into the open space of your compassionate heart on the out-breath, you breathe out everything that is the opposite: peace, clarity, healing, light, and love. You visualize this as a cool, white, soothing light that fills your own being and then radiates outwards. Once you are comfortable with your own suffering, you can expand the practice. You breathe in the suffering of a loved one who is struggling. You breathe in the suffering of all beings who are experiencing the same pain. You are all those who are lonely, all those who are sick, all those who are afraid. And on the out-breath, you send all of them, your peace, your strength, your light, your compassion. Tonglen is not about literally taking on the karma or illness of another. It is a practice for the mind, a powerful form of alchemy. It dissolves the illusion of a separate self. It cultivates boundless compassion, and it uses the very thing we are most afraid of, pain, as the raw material for generating love. It is the ultimate expression of turning poison into medicine. When you begin to live from this perspective, seeing triggers as teachers, irritants as potential pearls, and pain as the fuel for compassion, your entire relationship to life's difficulties undergoes a revolution. You move beyond resentment and into a state of profound gratitude for your challenges. You begin to trust the process of life, to see that every obstacle that appears on your path is not a mistake or a punishment, but a perfectly designed lesson from a compassionate universe that is conspiring for your liberation. This doesn't mean you seek out pain or enjoy hardship. It means you are grateful for the growth, the strength, and the wisdom that hardship inevitably reveals. It is the gratitude of the athlete for the demanding coach who sees their potential and pushes them beyond their perceived limits. It is the gratitude of the diamond for the immense pressure that transformed it from a lump of coal. You learn to greet every difficulty with the quiet, confident inner knowing, this is for me, this is my teacher, this is my path. This profound and radical transformation of your relationship with suffering, this ability to meet every challenge with gratitude and to use every pain as fuel for compassion, leads to the emergence of one of the crowning jewels of the awakened heart. It is a state of deep, abiding, and unshakable balance that can hold all of life's joys and sorrows with perfect equilibrium. It is a peace that cannot be disturbed because it has been forged in the very fires of hell. This is the state of equanimity. After learning to walk the path in your daily life, after discovering the alchemy that turns pain into wisdom, a new quality of being begins to settle and deepen within you. It is the result of all your courageous work, the crowning jewel of the awakened heart. It is a state of profound balance, a deep and unshakable peace that becomes the new ground of your existence. In the Buddhist tradition, this is known as upekkha, or equanimity. It is one of the four sublime states, along with loving kindness, compassion, and joy. If compassion is the heart's ability to tremble with the suffering of the world, equanimity is the mind's ability to remain perfectly still and spacious in the midst of it all. It is the deep, silent stillness of the ocean's depths which remains undisturbed, no matter how turbulent the waves on the surface may be. It is essential to understand what equanimity is not. In a culture that often confuses feeling with weakness, equanimity can be easily mistaken for its cold and distant cousins: indifference, apathy, or detachment. Indifference is a form of closing down the heart, a refusal to care. Apathy is a state of numbness, of feeling nothing. Detachment can imply a cold removal from the world. Equanimity is none of these. It is a state of profound and radical engagement with life, but without the hook of personal preference, desire, or aversion. The heart of equanimity is vast, warm, and endlessly spacious. It is a boundless, caring presence that allows all of life's experiences, the beautiful and the ugly, the joyful and the painful, to arise and pass away without disturbing your core of being. It is the ultimate balance point, poised perfectly between the pull of craving and the push of aversion. It does not mean you stop caring. It means you care so deeply and so widely that you are no longer thrown off balance by the fate of any one particular outcome. This profound state is not something that can be manufactured through willpower or positive thinking. It is the natural fruit that ripens on the tree of your practice, nourished by the roots of wisdom and compassion. It is the fruit of wisdom of prajna, because you have seen for yourself the truth of impermanence. Knowing deeply that all things are in a constant state of flux, you are no longer prone to extreme excitement in moments of success because you know they will not last. Nor are you thrown into utter despair by moments of failure because you know they too shall pass. Having seen the truth of no self anatta, you no longer take life's events so personally. Praise does not inflate a non-existent ego, and blame cannot wound a self that is not there. And having seen the truth of dependent origination, you understand the vast impersonal web of causes and conditions that creates every situation, which frees you from the trap of knee-jerk emotional reactions. Wisdom provides the big picture view, the cosmic perspective that naturally fosters a balanced mind. But wisdom alone can be dry. Equanimity is also the fruit of compassion, of karuna. Compassion is what ensures that your balance does not curdle into coldness. It is the quality of a master surgeon performing a life-saving operation. Her heart is filled with compassion for her patient, a deep and genuine wish for them to be well. But her mind and her hands must be perfectly steady, calm, and precise. If she were overwhelmed by emotional distress, she could not perform her function. If she were coldly indifferent, she would lack the humanity that makes for a great healer. Equanimity is this perfect synthesis of a soft, open heart and a steady, unwavering mind. It is the ability to care deeply while remaining perfectly centered and able to respond to any situation with clarity and grace. This state of being is best understood by how it relates to what Buddhism calls the 8 worldly winds. These are the 8 conditions of life, arranged in 4 pairs of opposites that constantly blow through our world and threaten to knock us off balance. They are pleasure and pain, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, and praise and blame. The unenlightened mind is like a leaf at the mercy of these winds. When the wind of praise blows, the leaf is lifted high, feeling wonderful. When the wind of blame blows, it is dashed to the ground, feeling worthless. Its entire sense of well-being is dependent on which way the wind is blowing on any given day. To live this way is to be a puppet, your strings pulled by external events and the opinions of other people. The person who has cultivated equanimity is like a great mountain. The winds still blow. The world will still deliver you moments of gain and moments of loss. People will still praise you one day and criticize you the next. But the mountain is not moved. The mountain remains stable, grounded, majestic, simply allowing the winds to blow around it. Its fundamental state of peace is not contingent on the weather. This is the stability of the awakened mind. There is a classic story from the life of the Buddha that perfectly embodies this mountain-like equanimity. One day, a man who was hostile to his teachings approached him and began to unleash a torrent of the most vile and vicious insults imaginable. He insulted the Buddha, his family, his ancestors, and his teachings. Throughout the entire tirade, the Buddha sat in perfect silence, his face calm, his presence radiating a quiet and gentle peace. He was the mountain, unmoved by the fierce wind of blame. He simply listened, allowing the man's anger to exhaust itself. When the man finally ran out of energy and fell silent, panting with rage, the Buddha looked at him with compassion and asked a simple question. "My friend," he said, "if you purchase a gift for someone and you offer it to them, but they do not accept it, to whom does the gift then belong?" The man, taken aback, thought for a moment and replied, "Well, it would still belong to me, of course." The Buddha nodded gently. "Exactly so," he said. "You have offered me this gift of your anger and your insults, but I do not accept it." This simple, profound response illustrates the very essence of equanimity. It is the realization that you have the ultimate freedom, the freedom to not accept the emotional poison that others may try to give you. You are not obligated to react. You are not obligated to become angry or defensive. You can remain in your own center, peaceful and free. Equanimity breaks the cycle of reactivity that creates so much of the world's suffering. This is the ultimate freedom. It is not freedom from the world, but freedom in the world. It is the freedom from being a slave to your own reactions. It is the freedom that comes from no longer needing the world to be a certain way or for people to behave a certain way in order for you to be at peace. You have finally become the master of your own inner kingdom. The peace you have cultivated is not a fragile thing that can be shattered by a harsh word or an unfortunate event. It is a deep, resilient and unconditional peace that has been forged in the fires of the breakdown and tempered by the wisdom of seeing reality as it is. It is a peace that can hold everything. From this high vantage point of equanimity, standing on the stable mountain of your own being, you can now look back upon the entire landscape of your journey. You can see the dark valleys you traveled, through the raging rivers you crossed, the forests where you were lost. But the view is different from here. The pain is no longer personal. The struggle is no longer a tragedy. It is all seen as part of a beautiful, intelligent, and necessary pattern, a divine choreography that was leading you to this very place. This leads to the final paradoxical realization of the entire path. From the high, quiet summit of equanimity, looking back across the rugged landscape of your journey, a final and exquisitely beautiful paradox comes into view. You see the whole arduous path, the initial shattering of your world, the terrifying death of the ego, the lonely darkness of the void, the painful shedding of your old self, and the slow, patient cultivation of wisdom and compassion. You see that every single step, every moment of pain, and every moment of grace was absolutely necessary. But here is the stunning cosmic punchline, the ultimate secret that could only be revealed. At the end, the entire journey was not about becoming someone new. It was an elaborate and divinely orchestrated process of unbecoming everything you were not in order to realize who you have always been. You were never actually traveling from a state of brokenness to a state of wholeness. You were simply on a long and winding path back to the home you never left. The entire path of breakdown and breakthrough was a necessary demolition project. Its purpose was not to build a new house, but to tear down the prison you had mistaken for a house so you could finally see the vast open sky that was always there. The spiritual path is not a process of addition but of subtraction. It is not about learning but about unlearning. It is the peeling away of layers of false identity, the stripping away of conditioned beliefs, the letting go of second-hand truths, until all that is left is the luminous, simple, and undeniable truth of your own essential nature. In the Mahayana tradition of Buddhism, this essential nature is known as Tathagatagarbha, which can be translated as Buddha nature. It is the profound and radical teaching that within every single sentient being, without exception, there exists a fundamental nature that is already perfect, complete, and fully awakened. It is like the vast, clear blue sky. Our ignorance, our fear, our trauma, our ego, these are like clouds that temporarily obscure the sky. From our perspective on the ground, it can seem like the entire sky is cloudy and grey. But the clouds never stain the sky. They are not a part of the sky's nature. They are temporary phenomena passing through. The sky itself remains ever present, ever pure, ever blue, whether we can see it or not. The spiritual journey is not the act of creating a blue sky. It is the process by which the clouds of our own confusion part, allowing us to see the brilliant, pristine sky that has been our true nature all along. You are not a broken being who needs to be fixed. You are a perfect sky who has forgotten what you are. Imagine a master sculptor who is presented with a large, rough block of marble. A student asks him, "Master, how will you ever create such a beautiful and lifelike statue from that shapeless stone?" The sculptor replies, "The statue is already here, hidden inside the stone. My job is not to create it, but simply to chip away all the pieces that are not the statue. You are that statue. Your Buddha nature, your true whole and beautiful self has always been present within you. Your conditioned personality with its fears, its traumas, and its egoic stories is the excess stone. The entire spiritual path, the breakdown, the practices of mindfulness and compassion, the insights of wisdom is the chisel and the mallet. Each painful moment of letting go, each difficult confrontation with your shadow was the sculptor's chisel chipping away another piece of what you were not. The process was arduous, it was noisy, and it was messy. But its purpose was not to build you up, but to reveal you. It was an act of liberation, of revealing the masterpiece that was already and always there. A beautiful parable from the Lotus Sutra tells this same story. A very poor man goes to visit a wealthy and compassionate friend. The friend hosts a great feast, and the poor man drinks too much wine and falls into a deep sleep. The wealthy friend has to leave on an urgent journey, but before he goes, he wants to help his destitute friend. So he takes a priceless, wish-fulfilling jewel and carefully sews it into the inner lining of the sleeping man's coat. The poor man eventually wakes up completely unaware of the treasure he now possesses. He stumbles back out into the world and resumes his life of extreme poverty. For years and years he wanders from place to place, begging for food and shelter, suffering from cold and hunger, living in misery, all the while carrying an incalculable fortune with him wherever he goes. One day he happens to cross paths with his wealthy friend again. The friend is shocked to see him in such a wretched state. "My dear friend," he exclaims, "why are you living like this? All those years ago I gave you a priceless jewel to ensure you would have everything you ever needed. It is sewn into your coat." The poor man is stunned. He reaches inside his tattered coat and feels the jewel for the first time. The realization floods him. He was never truly poor. He was wealthy beyond measure all along. He simply did not know it. We are this man. The jewel is our perfect, luminous Buddha nature. The suffering of our lives is the wandering in ignorance. The teacher, the Dharma, the breakdown itself is the compassionate friend who finally points to the treasure we have always carried. The path is not about earning the jewel. It is the moment of waking up to the wealth that has been ours from the very beginning. And so the great paradox is revealed. The heroic, epic journey of spiritual seeking with all its struggle and striving, all its becoming and overcoming, is ultimately an elaborate act of remembering. You have arrived finally back where you started, but as the poet T.S. Eliot wrote, you know the place for the first time. There is a deep and gentle humor in this realization. All that drama, all that angst, all that searching, only to discover that you were already home. All that effort to become whole, only to realize your wholeness was never in question. This realization does not invalidate the journey, it sanctifies it. It fills the heart with an almost unbearable gratitude for the entire process, for the pain that cracked the shell of the ego, for the teachers who pointed the way, and for the mysterious grace that led you on the long, winding, and necessary road back to yourself. This profound, joyful, and humbling realization that you were whole all along changes everything once more. The striving ceases completely. The need to protect or improve the self dissolves. What is left is a simple, radiant presence and an overflowing sense of gratitude for the journey that led you to this moment. And from this place of profound fullness, a new kind of action is born. It is not an action of seeking, but of sharing. It is the effortless shining of the jewel that you have finally uncovered. When the priceless jewel of your true nature is finally uncovered, not as something earned, but as something remembered, the journey does not culminate in a selfish act of possession. You do not hoard your jewel, polishing it in secret and gloating over your private spiritual wealth. For the final truth of the jewel is that it is not a solid thing, it is light, and the nature of light is to shine. To keep it for oneself is as meaningless as a candle trying to keep its flame to itself. The realization of your own inner wholeness naturally and inevitably overflows outward into a life of compassionate service. This is the expression of the Bodhisattva ideal, one of the most noble concepts in Mahayana Buddhism. A Bodhisattva is one who has traveled the entire journey. They have stood on the far shore of liberation, the shore of nirvana. They could have stepped into eternal peace, leaving the world of suffering behind. But at the very threshold of final release, moved by a boundless compassion born from the wisdom of interbeing, they make a profound choice. They turn back. They willingly re-enter the river of suffering, returning to the world, not because they are trapped, but because they are free. They return because of a vow that echoes in their heart. As long as there is a single being who still suffers, I will not enter final peace alone. This ideal should not be seen as a heavy duty or an impossible sacrifice. It is the most natural expression of an awakened heart. Imagine a person who awakens to find the building they are in is on fire. They discover a secret exit and escape to safety. Standing outside, breathing the fresh air, would their first instinct be to run away and congratulate themselves on their good fortune number? The instinct of a kind heart is to turn back, to cry out, and to show the others who are still trapped in the smoke the way out. The Bodhisattva is this person. Having seen the way out of their own fire of suffering, compassion compels them to do nothing else but help others find their own way. This life of service is not driven by pity or a sense of superiority. It is fueled by a deep empathy born from the realization that there is no true separation. The pain of another is no longer seen as theirs. It is felt as ours. The action of a bodhisattva is not that of a healthy person helping a sick one. It is the action of a healthy hand naturally reaching to bandage the other hand of the same body. The distinction between the helper and the helped begins to dissolve. There is only the flow of compassion. When action arises from the emptiness of a separate self, it takes on a new quality of effortlessness and grace. This is the principle known in Taoism as Wu Wei, or effortless action. Egoic action is always heavy. It is driven by an agenda. It calculates, it plans, it worries about the outcome. If I do this, what will I get in return? What will people think of me? Will this succeed? There is always a sense of strain, of pushing, of effort. Wu Wei is utterly different. It is action without an actor. It arises not from the ego's deliberation, but spontaneously from the wisdom of the moment. It is like water flowing down a hill. It doesn't need to think about the path, it naturally finds the way of least resistance, flowing around rocks and obstacles with perfect ease. A person living in the breakthrough no longer has to decide to be kind. Kindness simply flows from them like fragrance from a flower. They do not need to try to be patient. They possess an inner spaciousness that can hold the world's chaos. They speak the right word at the right time, not because they rehearsed it, but because they are listening so deeply that the word arises on its own. Their actions might look very ordinary. They still chop wood and carry water, but they are done with such presence and appropriateness that they have the power to heal and transform those around them. This life is saturated with an overarching quality, profound gratitude. It is no longer a practice you have to remember to do. It becomes the air you breathe, the natural state of your heart. You feel an inexpressible gratitude for the entire journey, especially its most difficult parts. You are grateful for the breakdown, for its fierce compassion that shattered your prison. You are grateful for the dark night, for its emptiness that purified you of everything untrue. You are grateful for every trigger, every irritating grain of sand now transformed into a pearl of wisdom. You are grateful for the teachers and the teachings that illuminated the path. You are grateful for the Sangha, the community of spiritual friends who walked with you. This gratitude extends beyond your spiritual journey and infuses every moment of life. You feel grateful for the gift of a single breath, for the feeling of warm sun on your skin, for the taste of a sweet piece of fruit. The whole of life, in its messy complexity and its simple beauty, is seen as an unbelievable gift. The myth of the hero's journey provides the final metaphor for this life. The hero is called to adventure, leaves their familiar village, the world of the ego. They enter a dark forest, the breakdown battle dragons and demons, the shadow and the ego, and finally find the priceless treasure, or the healing elixir, enlightenment. But the story does not end there. A true hero does not stay in the magical land with their treasure. The final essential stage of the journey is the return. The hero goes back to their ordinary village carrying the elixir. But they do not return as a conqueror, boasting of their exploits. They return in humility. They use their treasure, their wisdom, their compassion, their peace to heal the land. They help resolve disputes. They comfort the grieving. They inspire the young. Their very presence enriches the life of the community. They are no longer seeking adventures. They have become the wellspring of life for their people. This is the life of the breakthrough. You return to your ordinary life, but you bring the elixir with you. Your peace is the elixir. Your compassion is the elixir. Your wisdom is the elixir offered freely and joyfully to all you meet. And so the journey continues, but it is no longer a struggle. It is a dance. Sometimes a slow, contemplative dance. Sometimes a joyous, energetic dance. It is a celebration of life in all its facets, a full participation in the symphony of existence. You have not escaped life. You have learned to love it completely. And with this open heart, we conclude our journey of exploration, not with an ending, but with a new beginning, an invitation to step into your own dance. And so we come to the end of our journey of exploration together. We began by shattering the fragile myth of a blissful awakening, a beautifully painted promise that leaves so many feeling alone in their suffering. We journeyed bravely into the disorienting chaos of the ego's death throes and into the solitary emptiness of the dark night of the soul. We learned to face our own shadow with compassion, to let go of the relationships and identities that no longer fit the person we are becoming. From those ashes, we witnessed the birth of something new. We saw wisdom emerge from pain, compassion blossom from our own wounds, and a freedom that was not an escape from life, but the capacity to engage with it fully. We realized that this entire arduous journey was not a cosmic mistake, but a necessary purification, a purposeful breakdown to make way for a genuine breakthrough. If there is one core message, one single truth to carry with you from this conversation, it is this: trust your process. The inner turmoil you may be experiencing is not a sign that you are broken, but a sign that you are breaking free. The breakdown is not a failure on the spiritual path. It is the spiritual path. Life is not punishing you, it is refining you. The peace we all seek is not the absence of storms. It is the ability to be the calm, unwavering center in the very heart of the storm. True awakening is not floating away on a cloud of bliss, but courageously planting your feet in the soil of reality, learning to be radically and compassionately present for the entire human experience, for its joy and its sorrow, its light and its shadow, its beauty and its mess. Therefore, grant yourself the gift of patience. Hold your own heart with a tenderness you now know it deserves. Look upon your struggles not as a curse but as a sacred calling to a deeper level of being. You are on a path that has been walked by sages and saints for millennia. It is not an easy path, but it leads to a truth, a beauty, and a love that is beyond the ego's wildest imaginings. Trust that the storm will pass. Trust that the dawn will come. And know that deep beneath all the breaking you are being led home to the wholeness that has always been yours.